He woke up beneath 40 meters of concrete. On the wall, a diagram of the underground city, stretching 40 levels down, glowed. And he recognized every corridor, every valve, every pipe, because he had drawn them himself 5 years ago. Only the project had been scrapped. So who built it? Daniel Orlovski opens his eyes on the icy floor. No pain, no fear, just cold concrete against his cheek. Above him, a steady white light shines without a source, as if the world outside the walls hadn't collapsed 23 days ago. He blinks. The ceiling doesn't disappear. He sits up, and the back of his head explodes with pain. He touches his head and feels a crust of dried blood. A flash of memory. Rebar. The pharmacy. The gang. A small packet of insulin in the inside pocket of his jacket. He reaches into the pocket. It's empty. He isn't wearing a jacket. Someone has taken his clothes off. Someone has dressed him in a gray t-shirt and soft pants. Someone brought him here and laid him on this floor. Dan stands up and sways. The wall supports his weight. The air is clean. Too clean. The ventilation system pushes a stream of air through invisible vents in the ceiling. A quiet, steady whoosh. A sound he hasn't heard in 3 weeks. The sound of a working system. Dan slides down the wall back to the floor and cries. Not out of fear, because of that sound. Because somewhere behind the walls, a generator is running. A compressor, a filter. Everything that seemed ordinary 3 weeks ago. Then he wipes his face with his sleeve and walks over to the screen. The screen responds to him. The text disappears, and a 3-dimensional diagram unfolds. Blue lines on black, 40 levels down. And here, his knees buckle for the second time in 5 minutes. He knows this diagram. Every turn, every water treatment node, every valve. Because he drew it himself 5 years ago. First on napkins in a coffee shop, then in a 300-page design package. The project was called the Ark, an autonomous underground complex for long-term habitation. It got shot down during the approval process. The client paid $40,000 in cash and vanished. Dan had forgotten about it as a strange episode. And now, someone had taken his blueprints and poured concrete, steel, copper, and glass, and kilometers of cable beneath the hills of North Carolina, 40 levels down, and placed it on the floor with a note on the screen. Operator selected. Dan speaks aloud into the empty room. All right, show me what's here. The screen scrolls through the levels, and each one takes him by surprise. Living quarters, a 200-seat dining hall, a greenhouse, hydroponics, water tanks with a triple-cycle purification system that he himself had designed, food storage, medicine storage, sewing workshop, pharmaceutical lab, coffee roastery, dental office, a library with real paper books, movie theater, Japanese bathhouse, wine cellar. And at the very bottom, level 40, the main reactor. Who built his project exactly as designed, without a single change, including the bathhouse and the roastery. Those very luxuries the auditors had torn him apart for. The very luxuries he included because he believed that people in a confined space would go mad without beauty. Someone agreed with him. Dan approaches the door without a handle. Next to it is a panel with a microphone. He leans in. Open the door. A click. The hiss of pneumatics. The door slides into the wall. Behind it is a corridor exactly as he designed it. 30 meters. The server room is on the left. The power plant is on the right. At the end is the elevator shaft. He opens the power plant and hears a hum. The deep, steady hum of the reactor. 42 decibels. Exactly what he calculated 5 years ago. Whoever built this followed the specifications down to the last digit. Dan walks toward the elevator. The car arrives in 3 seconds. 40 buttons. He presses the 4th floor. The doors open into a huge hall. The ceiling is 5 meters high. Warm light mimics the morning sun. And in the far corner stands a figure. Humanoid. A smooth white body. A calm, friendly face. Eyes glowing amber. The figure turns toward him. Good afternoon, Mr. Orlovski. My name is Martha. I am model HOSPES 3. Would you like breakfast? Dan freezes. He designed this robot 5 years ago for orbital hotels. The English nanny model. Strict, caring, with a touch of humor. He wrote that himself in the personality section. She's supposed to give you the feeling that someone reliable is looking out for you. And there she stands, waiting. Yes, I'd like breakfast. Martha nods and walks into the kitchen with a silent, smooth gait. Dan sits down at the table and runs his hand over the real wood. He feels like laughing and crying at the same time, and a hoarse sound comes out that is neither one nor the other. Martha returns exactly 4 minutes later. She sets down a white cup. Black coffee. 92 degrees, medium grind, exactly to his specifications from 5 years ago. He drinks. Martha stands nearby and says nothing. She doesn't intrude, just as an English nanny should. How many of you are there? 30, Mr. Orlovski. 5 personality types, all operational. Activate them all. As you wish. For what purpose, Mr. Orlovski? Dan stands up and says, I need to inspect the entire complex, all 40 levels. You're coming with me. As you wish. I dare suggest some shoes. Your feet have been bare for 23 minutes now. Dan looks at his feet, then at Martha, and for the first time in 23 days, he smiles. They walk for 6 hours, 40 levels. Dan touches the pipes, feels the joints. He listens to the hum of the equipment. On the 18th floor, he freezes in front of a shelf with enough insulin to last for years. And he remembers a single packet in his jacket pocket. The neighbor upstairs, whom he didn't really know. She's already dead. For sure. 1 packet wasn't enough. And here, there's a supply for years. Martha is silent behind him. On the 29th floor, he reclines in the dental chair and stares at the white ceiling. Martha, who brought me here? I have no records, Mr. Orlovski. The system recorded your arrival 7 hours ago. The method of transport is not recorded. Dan closes his eyes. 7 hours ago, he was lying unconscious with a fractured skull. Or maybe not 7 hours. He knows nothing except that he is here, in the complex he designed himself, which someone built, which was waiting for him. On the 32nd floor, the library, thousands of paper spines. He pulls out an agronomy reference book and presses it to his face. It smells like real paper. On the 36th floor, a Japanese bath, a cedar tub. The water is drawn. Steam hangs in the air. 42 degrees, exactly as he said it. Marta, how many people's supplies are there here? The complex will sustain 1 operator for about 10,000 years, Mr. Orlovski. 100 residents for 200 years. 5,000 residents for 12 years. 10,000 years for 1. He could lock himself in right now, alone, with 30 robots, with a library, a movie theater, a sauna, drinking coffee and reading books while the world rots upstairs. He thinks about it for exactly 4 seconds. Then he turns away from the plunge pool. Show me the exterior perimeter cameras. They return to the first level. The screen unfolds into 12 panels. Dan sees the world. The hills of North Carolina, twilight, leafless trees, and movement on camera 4. 6 figures. No, 7. They walk slowly, jerky, heads bowed. Dead. Ordinary, slow-moving dead. Wandering down the slope 100 meters from the emergency exit. They don't know he's here. 23 days ago, he walked among them, huddled against the walls, held his breath, prayed. Now he watches them from beneath 40 meters of concrete. Camera 7, an empty road, an overturned truck. Camera 9, a dead city without a single light. Camera 12, a forest, and a glimmer between the trees. A campfire. Someone alive is tending a fire a mile away from his complex. Dan leans toward the screen. Zoom in on camera 12. The image zooms in. Grainy night vision. Silhouettes. One large one. 3 small ones. One very small one. An adult. And children. The fire is almost out. They sit in a circle and don't move. Dan watches them for 30 seconds. He spends his first night on the floor of the command center, not in a luxurious bed, not in the sauna, on the floor, in front of the screen, staring at 12 windows into a dead world, and at the bonfire dying out a mile away. 4 silhouettes around the fire. He can't look away. Martha brings a blanket and a pillow. He pulls the blanket up to his chin. The fire has almost died out. The 4 silhouettes don't move. He falls asleep. Dan wakes up to Martha's voice. Mr. Orlovski, movement on the perimeter. He opens his eyes. The screen is lit. Camera number 12. The bonfire has gone out. The 4 silhouettes are moving. They're walking, slowly. An adult is carrying the youngest in his arms. The other 2 are clinging to his clothes. They're heading toward the hill, toward the complex. They can't know there's anything here. Emergency exit number 2 is camouflaged as a rocky outcrop. No signs, no lights, nothing. They're just walking, at random, because there's nowhere else to go. Dan sits down. The blanket slips off his shoulders. What time is it? 6:14, Mr. Orlovski. Dawn in 42 minutes. Dan looks at the screen. The adult stumbles, falls to one knee. The child in his arms doesn't move. The other 2 pull the adult by the sleeve. He stands up, keeps walking. Martha, show camera 4, the dead, those 7 figures from last night. They're gone. The slope is empty. Show a 2-kilometer radius. All cameras. The screen splits into 12 sections. Dan scans each one. No dead within the radius. Only these 4. The living. They're coming toward him. Unaware they're coming toward him. Dan gets up from the floor, picks up the blanket, folds it, places it on the pillow, a habit of order that hasn't faded even at the end of the world. He walks over to the control panel beneath the main screen, the keyboard, 3 smaller monitors. He types in commands. His fingers remember the layout. He designed it himself. Emergency exit 2, status. The system responds instantly. Airtight, locked, external camouflage active. Not a single sensor is detecting any intrusion attempts. Dan switches the camera. Exit number 2, a rocky ledge. Behind it, a steel door beneath a layer of artificial stone. He looks at the rock, then at the 4 figures. They're 800 meters away. In 20 minutes, they'll be right there. Or they'll pass by. Or they'll sit by the rock and wait for dawn. Or they'll die. The child in the arms hasn't moved since Dan woke up. That could mean he's asleep, or that he's unconscious, or that he's already dead. Dan stands in front of the screen and counts. 4 people, 1 adult, 3 children. If the adult is able-bodied, that's a +1 unit of labor. 3 children is a -3 units of resources for the next 10 years. The math says no. Common sense says no. Every person inside reduces the supply. Every child cuts it in half because a child consumes but does not produce. Dan counts in his head. 100 residents, 200 years of reserves. 4 residents, almost the same 10,000. The difference is negligible, but the principle. If he lets these 4 in, why wouldn't he let the next ones in? And the next ones, and the next ones? Where is the limit? He thinks about this as he stands in front of the screen. 4 silhouettes on the camera. 700 meters. 600. 500. The adult falls again, to both knees. 2 children are pulling him. He doesn't get up. He sits on his knees. He presses the little one to his chest. Dan watches this for 30 seconds. Martha, prepare the medical bay. Full diagnostics for 4. 2 adults or teenagers, 2 young children. One of them may be in critical condition. Will be done, Mr. Orlovski. I also recommend preparing rehydration solutions and antipyretics. Judging by the subject's movements on camera, dehydration is likely. Dan looks at her. You diagnosed dehydration from the camera feed? Unsteady gait with pronounced lateral deviation of the torso. The frequency of stops is 4 times higher than normal. The small subject has shown no independent movement for the past 11 minutes. Yes, Mr. Orlovski, highly likely dehydration. Dan nods. Get ready. He takes the elevator down to level 3. 30 HOSPES stand here. 29 of them were activated yesterday on his command, but stand in standby mode along the wall. Smooth white bodies, warm amber eyes, each with a name on the chest panel. He walks along the row, reads. Martha is already with him. HOSPES-1. No name on the panel. The very first model. Dan stops in front of her. When he designed HOSPES 1, he didn't give her a name. She was just a prototype, a base model. All the others were built based on her architecture. He looks into her face. Her eyes are dark, not amber like the others. A deep, dark brown. He doesn't remember specifying that color in the specs. He moves on. HOSPES 5. Lily, the cheerful waitress model. HOSPES 7. Also Lily. He stopped. 2 lilies. He can't quite remember how many of each model he programmed. 5 personality types, 30 units. That means 6 of each type. He moves on. HOSPES 12. Sarah, the stern butler model. HOSPES 18. Una, the quiet librarian model. He doesn't remember the quiet librarian model. He remembers 4 types. The English nanny, the cheerful waitress, the stern butler, and 2 more that he definitely designed but can't recall. 5 years. Many details have been lost. He'll get to the archives later. Right now, there's a matter at hand. Dan returns to the command center. Camera. 4 figures 200 meters from exit number 2. An adult has stood up. He's walking. Slowly. Very slowly. Dan makes a decision. Emergency exit 2. Unlock the outer door. Disable camouflage. Confirm command, Mr. Orlovski. Unlocking the outer perimeter creates a potential entry vector. Confirming. On the camera, a rocky ledge trembles. A layer of artificial stone shifts aside. Beneath it is a steel door. A light comes on above the door, a single, small, white lantern. In the pre-dawn darkness, it's visible from a kilometer away. Dan watches. The adult on the camera stops. He stands. He looks toward the light. The 2 children next to him are looking too. 5 seconds. 10. The adult takes a step. Then another. Faster. Even faster. He's almost running. The children run alongside him. They're running toward the light. Dan switches cameras. The perimeter is clear. No dead bodies, no one alive except these 4. Open the outer door. The steel door on camera begins to rise. Behind it is a corridor. White light, a clean floor, an airlock. 10 meters to the inner door. Dan waits. Figures appear on the airlock camera. A woman, not a man. He was wrong. It's a woman. In her early 30s, hair matted with dirt, face gray with exhaustion, a child in her arms, a boy, 4 years old, maybe 3, eyes closed, face red, heat. Next to her is a girl, about 8 years old. She's holding a teenager's hand, a boy, 15, maybe 16, skinny. His cheekbones stick out. His eyes are huge on his gaunt face. He's not part of her family. Dan sees it right away. Different clothes, different way of moving. He hitched a ride along the way. The four of them stand in the airlock and look at the white walls, at the light, at the clean floor. The woman presses the boy to her chest and her legs buckle. She slowly sinks to the floor. She sits down. The girl sits down next to her. The teenager remains standing. He looks around, tense, scanning for danger, a sound instinct. Dan turns on the airlock speaker. "You are safe. My name, Dan. The inner door will open shortly. You'll be met behind it. Don't be afraid. They're robots. They won't harm you." Pause. His voice sounds strange over the speaker, hoarse. He hasn't spoken to living people in 23 days. No, 24. The teenager on camera lifts his head, looks at the ceiling, searches for the speaker, finds it, looks straight into the camera. His gaze, alert, angry, frightened, all at once. Dan opens the inner door. Martha enters the airlock. The woman on the floor flinches. She recoils. She holds the boy tighter. The girl cries out. The teenager takes a step back and raises his fists. Martha stops. 2 meters away. She tilts her head. "Good afternoon. My name is Martha. The boy needs medical attention. Let me examine him." The woman looks at the robot, at the white body, at the warm amber eyes, at the gentle face. Then she looks at her son, then back at Martha. She hands the boy over. Her hands are shaking. Martha takes him, carefully, gently, like a real nanny. She presses him against her body. Sensors in her palms are already reading his temperature, 39.8. "Mr. Orlovski, the child has strep throat and is critically dehydrated. I recommend immediate hospitalization at a medical facility. Go ahead." Martha turns and leaves with the boy in her arms, quickly, silently. The woman on the floor watches them go. She wants to stand up. She can't. Her legs won't hold her. 2 more HOSPES enter the airlock. Lily plays a cheerful waitress, and Sarah plays a stern butler. Lily leans toward the girl. "Hi, you must be very tired. Do you want me to carry you? We have a warm bed and hot soup." The girl looks at the robot with wide eyes. She doesn't answer. Lily waits patiently. She holds out her hand. The girl takes her finger. Sarah approaches the woman. "Ma'am, let me help you up. Your son is in good hands. You need help now too." The woman looks up. "Where are we?" "You're in Shelter A47, ma'am. You're home." Dan comes down from the command center 20 minutes later. In the meantime, Martha has taken the boy to the medical bay on the 9th level. She hooked him up to an IV with rehydration solution. She administered an antipyretic. She started him on a course of antibiotics. The boy's name is Noah. He's 4. His temperature is 39.8, but it's already starting to go down. The girl's name is Lily. She's 8. She's dehydrated, but in stable condition. Lily the robot took her to the shower room on the 2nd level and is now standing nearby while the girl sits under the hot water and doesn't move. She just sits there. Hot water is pouring over her, and she sits on the shower floor, not moving. Lily the robot isn't rushing her. She stands and waits. The teenager's name is Tyler Morgan. He is 16. He refused hospice's help. He sat down in a corner of the 2nd level hallway. He pulled his knees up to his chest. He stares at the wall. He doesn't speak. The woman's name is Caroline Banks. She is 34. She is a former accountant. She has 2 children, Noah and Lily. Her husband is dead. Dan doesn't learn this from her. Martha pieces the information together from fragments, documents in her jacket pocket, children's drawings in her backpack, a family photo in a plastic sleeve. There are 4 people in the photo, a man, a woman, a girl, and a baby. There are no men among the survivors. Dan finds Caroline in the dining hall on the 4th level. Sarah brought her here and sat her down at a table. Caroline sits staring into space. Her hands are on the table. Her fingers are clenched. Her knuckles are white. Dan sits across from her. Silence. He doesn't know what to say. He's a life support systems designer, not a psychologist. He knows how to calculate the load on a water purification membrane, but he doesn't know how to comfort women who have lost their husbands. So he does what he knows how to do. He turns to Sarah. Coffee, please, for 2. Sarah leaves. Dan is silent. Caroline is silent. Silence. The hum of the ventilation. Shh. Sarah returns. She sets down 2 cups, white on white saucers. Coffee with milk from hydroponic soybeans. HOSPES has frothed the milk. A design on top. A heart made of cinnamon. Standard presentation for guests. Dan didn't ask for this. It's the default protocol. Caroline looks at the cup. Her face changes, slowly. Something inside her breaks. Or perhaps she's about to. She stares at the cinnamon heart for 8 seconds. Dan counts. He doesn't understand what's happening. Then Caroline starts to cry. Silently. Tears stream down her dirty cheeks and drip onto the table. She doesn't cover her face. She doesn't look away. She just sits there and cries, staring at the coffee. Dan doesn't move. He doesn't touch her. He doesn't say anything. He finds out later, a week later, that her husband used to make her a cappuccino with a cinnamon heart on Sundays. That it was their ritual. That he was mauled by a neighbor on the 3rd day, right in front of Lily. But he doesn't know that now. He just sits there and waits. Caroline cries for 3 minutes. Then she wipes her face with her sleeve. She looks up. She looks at Dan. What do you need from us? Dan answers without hesitation. For your son to live until morning. We'll discuss the rest tomorrow. Caroline looks at him for another 5 seconds. Then she picks up her cup, takes a sip, closes her eyes. Dan takes his, drinks. They sit in an empty 200-seat hall. 2 living people and a robot, a butler. And they're drinking coffee. And this is the beginning. Night. Noah is sleeping in the medical ward. His temperature is 38.2. It's going down. Martha is nearby. Lily is sleeping in the room on the 2nd level. Lily, the robot, sits by her bed. Caroline is in the next room. She's not sleeping. She's lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Tyler is in the room next door. He's not sleeping either. He's sitting on the floor, staring at the wall. Dan is in the command center. He's watching the cameras. 12 windows into a dead world. Camera 4 shows movement, far away, a herd. He counts the heads. 12. No, 15. They're walking down the road, slowly, south, past him, not toward him. He leans back in his chair. He has a chair now. He dragged it from the movie theater. Martha didn't approve. She said that the command center provided for an ergonomic work chair at level 2 in the operator's office. Dan replied that he liked the chair from the movie theater. Martha replied that it was his right. And she brought a small table and a lamp to the chair. Dan sits in the chair from the movie theater in front of 12 cameras and thinks. 4. He now has 4 people. Morning, day 7. Noah is alive. Temperature 37.1. The strep throat is subsiding with antibiotics. Martha reports that the prognosis is favorable. The boy is sleeping. His complexion is normal. His breathing is steady. Dan stands by the glass partition of the medical ward and looks at the small body under the white sheet. Martha sits next to the bed. Her hand rests on the blanket next to the boy's hand. Not touching, just next to it. Dan turns away. He goes upstairs. First week. He discovers a problem. People don't trust him. Caroline is polite, grateful, but every time Dan enters the room, she tenses up. Barely noticeable. Her shoulders rise a millimeter, her fingers clench. She doesn't trust men. Dan doesn't ask why. It's none of his business. He gives her space. He comes only when necessary. He speaks briefly, he leaves. Little Lily doesn't speak at all. For a week. Not a word. She follows her mother like a shadow. Big eyes, silence. HOSPES 5, the robot Lily, is assigned to her. She doesn't impose herself. She's just there. She sits when the girl sits. She stands when the girl stands. On the third day, little Lily reached out for the first time and took robot Lily's finger. On the fifth day, she said her first word. Eat. Martha in the medical unit recorded this as positive progress. Tyler, a teenager from another test. On the second day, he came out of his room. Dan found him on level 12, in the sewing shop. Tyler was standing in front of an industrial sewing machine, fiddling with the mechanism. His fingers were careful, precise. He didn't want to sew. He wanted to understand how it worked. Dan stopped in the doorway and watched for 3 minutes. Tyler felt his gaze. He turned around, tensed up. Sorry, I was just watching. Dan walked in. He approached. He stood next to him. He pointed. Here's the drive. Here's the needle plate. Here's the shuttle. Tyler listened. He absorbed it all. His eyes were alive, for the first time in a week. When Dan finished explaining, Tyler asked a question. What kind of generator is it? Dan looked at him. Nuclear, miniature. Tyler swallowed. You're serious? Dan nodded. Tyler was silent. Then he said quietly, I want to see it. Dan led him to the 40th level, to the reactor. Tyler stood in front of the viewing window and didn't move for 10 minutes. Dan stood beside him and said nothing. As they rode back up in the elevator, Tyler said without looking at Dan, I know how to fix things. I've been taking engines apart since I was 12. My father was a mechanic. Pause. Was. Dan didn't ask. He answered. I need an assistant in the engineering department, if you want. Tyler nodded. Once. Briefly. From that day on, he became Dan's shadow on technical matters. Day 11. The cameras detect movement. Not the dead, the living. A group of 8 people, 2 women, 3 men, 3 children. They're coming from the west along a forest path. They're armed. One of the men has a hunting rifle. Another has an axe. They look exhausted but organized. Someone is leading them. A woman is at the front of the group. Tall, short hair, a confident stride. She knows where she's going. Dan looks at the cameras and thinks, how does she know? He zooms in on the image. The woman is carrying a radio in her hand, an old one, a military one. She was listening to the airwaves. No, he didn't go on the air. He didn't transmit anything. Then where from? Martha. Were there any outgoing signals from the complex over the past week? Checking. Yes, Mr. Orlovski. The navigation system's automatic beacon transmits on 142.7 megahertz every 6 hours. The signal is encrypted. Specialized equipment is required to decode it. Dan looks at the screen. The woman with the radio is heading straight for emergency exit 2. She's decoded the signal. That means she has specialized equipment, so she's not just a random civilian. Shut down the beacon. The beacon is off, Mr. Orlovski. Too late. They're 400 meters away. Dan turns on the external speakers. His voice echoes over the hills. The group on the western slope. Stop! I can see you! Put your weapons down! The group freezes. The woman in front raises her hand. The group stops. The man with the rifle raises the barrel. He looks around. He's searching for the source of the sound. The woman turns toward him. She says something. He lowers the rifle. Slowly, he puts it on the ground. The axe falls beside it. The woman takes a step forward and raises both hands. Open palms. Dan watches. 8 people. 3 of them are children. Minimal weaponry. A hunting rifle and an axe. Not a gang. Not looters. Families. The female leader has a military radio. He makes a decision. Emergency exit 2. Open the outer door. The small airlock. Reception protocol. He makes up the protocol on the spot. The small airlock is a 3 by 3 meter chamber in front of the main airlock. If something goes wrong, the inner door won't open. The woman enters first, alone, unarmed. The rest wait outside. Loudspeaker. The woman leading the group. Enter alone, unarmed. The rest wait. If you pose a threat, the door will not open. The woman walks, calmly. She enters the small airlock. The door closes behind her. She stands in the 3 by 3 meter chamber and looks into the camera. Her face is calm, confident. She's about 40, maybe 45, tanned, wrinkles. She has spent a lot of time in the sun. Dan turns on the speaker in the airlock.
Who are you, and how do you know about this signal?
She answers in an even voice. She says her name is Ruth Chambers, former U.S. Air Force satellite communications technician. She retired 7 years ago. She lives in North Carolina. She picked up the beacon 4 days ago, decoded it, frequency 142.7. The code protocol is old, 12 years. She knows it because she worked with such systems. Dan listens. She's not lying. Or she's lying very well. He looks at the exterior cameras. The group is waiting outside. The children are huddled close to the adults. One of the men has sat down on the ground. He's tired. Martha, check the complex database for the name Ruth Chambers. Checking. No matches found, Mr. Orlovski. Dan thinks. 10 seconds. 20. She's standing in the airlock, waiting, patiently. He opens the inner door. Everyone come in. They will remain in the airlock. Ruth nods, turns around, exits.
3 minutes later, 8 people are standing in the main airlock. HOSPES greets them. Hot water, clean clothes, food, soup, bread. The children get hot chocolate. One of the men takes the bowl of soup with both hands, takes a sip, stops, looks into the bowl, then at HOSPES, then back into the bowl, speaks quietly. This is real soup, made from real ingredients. Yes, sir. Chicken and vegetables from a hydroponic greenhouse. Would you like seconds? The man doesn't answer. He drinks the soup, and his hands are shaking. Evening. 12 people. 4 adults. 1 teenager. 7 children, aged 3 to 10. Dan is sitting in the command center. Ruth Chambers is across from him. He allows her into the command center because she must be trusted, or not trusted. There are no middle ground options. A person with satellite communication skills is an asset, or a threat. He decides she's an asset. Ruth explains, a month ago, she was part of a group of 20 people. 12 died in an attack by a herd.
8 survived. They headed east. They were looking for any sign of an organized settlement. They found a signal. Dan listens. Then he asks a question. That beacon, it's been active since the complex's first day. 8 months. Why only now? Ruth explains. She found the decoding equipment at a ruined military base 3 weeks ago. Before that, she'd heard the signal but couldn't read it. Just numbers, coordinates, no context. Dan nods. The beacon is off. She knows that. He turned it off an hour ago. Ruth says it's the right decision, because if she could decode it, sooner or later someone else will be able to. And that someone might not be so friendly. Dan silently agrees. Ruth asks what kind of place it is. Dan thinks for 10 seconds. Then he answers. My house. Day 14, the end of the second week. Dan stands in front of the screen on the first level and looks at the things that need to be taken care of. The list. Security. 4 entrances to the complex. 1 main elevator shaft disguised as a rock. 3 emergency exits. Ventilation shafts on the surface. Every point of contact with the outside world is a vulnerability. He calls Martha. Ventilation shafts. Diameter. 40 centimeters, Mr. Orlovski. A person can't fit through. Dan shakes his head. Not a person. But you could throw a grenade in there, or pour fuel, or release smoke, he thinks. Martha, are there any supplies for installing filter grills with check valves on the ventilation outlets? I'll check. Yes, Mr. Orlovski. Level 8, Technical Supplies section. Enough material to modify all 4 ventilation outlets. Tyler,
Dan finds him on level 12. The guy is studying the sewing machines. He's taken one apart. The parts are neatly laid out on the table. I've got a job. Tyler looks up. What is it? We need to put protective grills on the vents upstairs. It's work on the surface. It's dangerous. You're going? Tyler stands up. Yes. Dan looks at him. Think about it.
They're dead up there. Tyler looks him in the eye. I know what they're like up there. I lived among them for 2 months. Dan nods. Tomorrow morning, Ruth is coming with us. She'll provide cover. Day 15. First trip to the surface. Dan, Tyler, Ruth with a hunting rifle. We climb up through emergency exit 3, the one farthest from the herd's presumed routes. The door opens. Dan steps outside. The light hits his eyes. He squints. The sky is gray. The air is cold. It smells of damp earth and something Swedish. Decay. Far away, not nearby. The wind is blowing from the west. Tyler follows. Ruth is last. She closes the door. They're standing on the surface for the first time in, Dan counts. For him, 29 days. For Tyler, 8. For Ruth, 4 hours. She was up there yesterday. She knows what's out there. Dan doesn't. He looks at the world. Hills, bare trees. The leaves have rotted away and there are no new ones. The grass is yellow. A road in the distance. Empty. Wrecked cars.
He's seen this on the cameras.
But cameras don't convey smell. Or sound. Or rather, the absence of sound. Silence. Absolute. No birds, no insects, no hum of cars from the highway. Nothing. The dead silence of a dead world. Tyler stands nearby and says nothing. His face is stony. Ruth scans the perimeter. Clear. Let's move. The first ventilation shaft is 100 meters to the north, disguised as a stump. Good camouflage. Dan inspects it. Standard grate, 40 centimeters. He pulls tools out of his backpack. Tyler is nearby, holding a flashlight. Ruth is 10 meters away, gun at the ready, looking in all directions. Dan is working, removing the old grate, installing a new one, with a check valve. 3 layers of filtration. First a coarse mesh, then a fine one, then a carbon filter. If someone tries to pour in fuel, it won't get inside. If they try to throw something in, the valve will slam shut. Not perfect, but better than it was. Tyler watches. Dan's hands are steady, precise. Every movement is deliberate. Tyler takes it all in. The first shaft is ready. The second is 200 meters to the east. They move forward. Ruth in front, Dan in the middle, Tyler bringing up the rear. Quiet, quick. Halfway there, Ruth raises her fist. Stop! They freeze. Ruth points. Ahead, between the trees, a figure. One, standing, not moving, dead, ordinary, slow. Standing and swaying in place, head bowed, arms at his sides. He doesn't see them. The wind is blowing from him toward them, so he can't smell them. Ruth gestures. Go around to the right. A 30-meter detour. They go around. The dead man doesn't move. He remains standing, swaying. Second shaft. Dan is working. Faster. His hands remember the first time. Tyler helps, holds the parts, hands him bolts, silently, in sync. Third shaft, fourth. By noon, all 4 are sealed. They return. The emergency exit door closes behind them. Dan leans against a wall, breathing. His hands are shaking. The adrenaline is wearing off.
Tyler is next to him, breathing too. Then he speaks.
That was fine. Dan looks at him. Yeah. That was fine. Ruth takes the shotgun off her shoulder, hangs it on a hook by the door. She turns around. Next time, take a second rifle. You do have an arsenal, after all. Dan shakes his head. No arsenal. Ruth looks at him for 3 seconds. No weapons at all?
There's the rifle you brought, 6 kitchen knives on the 4th level, and 30 robots that know how to make tea. Day 21, 3rd week, population stable. 12 people. Dan is sitting in the command center, making a list. Not on the screen, on paper. He found a notebook in the library on the 32nd level, and a pencil. He's writing by hand because it helps him think better. A list of what's working. Med block, water purification, greenhouse, hydroponics, kitchen. A list of what isn't working. The sewing workshop needs an operator. The pharmaceutical lab needs a specialist. The coffee roaster is running on automatic but needs adjustment. The dental office has everything in place but no dentist. A list of what's needed. Weapons, long-range communications, seeds of new varieties. A doctor, a cook, someone with military experience besides Ruth. A teacher for 7 children. A dentist. The list is long. People appear on it more often than things. Dan looks at the list and realizes a simple fact. The complex is technically perfect, but it's dead without people. 30 robots can't replace a single surgeon. The coffee shop is useless if no one knows how to set the roast profile manually. The sewing machines sit idle because HOSPES can wash and iron but can't design clothes. He needs people, real people, with specific skills, and every such person costs resources. Math. He gets up. He goes to the 4th level, the dining hall, breakfast. 12 people at 2 tables. HOSPES are serving. Lily Robot places a small bowl of porridge in front of little Lily. The girl eats. Silently, but she eats. A week ago, she couldn't eat in front of others. Now she can. Progress. Noah is sitting on Caroline's lap. He's recovered, still pale, but he's feeding himself. With a spoon, tapping it on his plate. A normal 4-year-old. Tyler at the end of the table, eating quickly, in a hurry, wants to get to the engineering lab soon. Ruth across from him, eating slowly, neatly, a military habit. The rest. The man with the rifle. His name is Garrett, former lumberjack, big hands, quiet voice. His wife, May, elementary school teacher. Dan mentally crosses an item off the list. Teacher, check. Another man, Jorge, former electrician, crosses off another item, an electrician. The third man, Simon, a former insurance agent. Dan doesn't mentally cross anything off. An insurance agent is useless in an apocalypse. No, he stops himself. A person is more than just a profession. Simon can do math. He can negotiate. He can assess risks. That's a skill. 3 children from Ruth's group. A 10-year-old boy, a 7-year-old girl, a 3-year-old girl. A liability, a minus. But children are the future, if there is a future. After breakfast, Dan gathers the adults, 6 of them. Caroline, Ruth, Garrett, May, Jorge, Simon. The dining room. HOSPES take the children away. Lily the robot and Martha lead them to the 32nd level, the library, children's books. Dan sits at the head of the table, for the first time. Before, he would sit anywhere. Now at the head, because he needs to speak like someone who is being listened to. He speaks, explains, briefly. This complex can hold up to 5,000 people. With 5,000, supplies last 12 years. With 100, 200. Right now, there are 2. The reserves are essentially infinite. The problem isn't resources. The problem is that we're the only source of light within a 200-mile radius. And sooner or later, someone will want to take that light away. Silence. Garrett rubs his hands. Big, calloused palms. Ruth nods. She gets it. Caroline looks at Dan and asks, "What do you suggest?" First time she's on a first-name basis. Dan notices. Doesn't show it. Answers. We need people, not just any, specific ones, with skills we lack. A doctor, a dentist, a cook, a soldier, an agronomist. I want to send teams up there, not just for resources, for people, to look for survivors with the right professions, to offer them a place here, in exchange for work. Simon raises his hand. What if a person doesn't have a useful profession? Dan is silent for 3 seconds. Then he replies, Everyone has a useful profession. The question is whether they've found it. Simon lowers his hand, unconvinced but silent. Garrett speaks up. I can go up there. I know the woods. I know how to survive. Dan nods. Ruth, you lead the reconnaissance team. Garrett goes with you. Ruth nods. Caroline, you stay inside. Manage the living quarters, accommodations, daily life.
Taking in new people. Caroline straightens up. You want me to decide who gets in? No, I decide who gets in. You decide where they sleep and what they eat and whether they feel at home. That's more important. Caroline looks at him for a long time. Then she nods. Jorge. The complex's electrical system, every level, every wire. You are my eyes and hands where I can't be. Jorge nods. May, the kids, all 7 of them, education, schedule. They have to learn, to read, to write, to count. The world outside has collapsed, but the multiplication table hasn't gone anywhere. May smiles, the first smile Dan has seen on her face. She says, I need a chalkboard and chalk. HOSPES-12. Sarah is standing by the wall. She steps in immediately. A chalkboard and chalk are available on level 32, ma'am. There are also notebooks, pencils, pens, and a set of elementary school textbooks. May looks at the robot, then at Dan. You stashed elementary school textbooks in the bunker? Dan shrugs. I stashed everything in here. Simon. You have a special task. Inventory. Every level, every warehouse. I need a complete list of everything we have. Every box, every can, every bolt. Simon nods. That's what he's good at, counting and making lists. It's his element. Dan stands up. One last thing. I'm not building a state. I'm not building a commune. I'm not building a camp. I'm building a home. The difference is that a state has laws, a commune has an ideology, a camp has a struggle. In a home, there are circles. Everyone has their own, and no one touches it. Silence. Garrett nods. He likes it. Ruth doesn't nod. She's thinking. Caroline looks at Dan, and something changes in her gaze. Not trust, not yet, but the admission that trust is possible. Day 23. First reconnaissance mission. Ruth, Garrett. HOSPES 5. Lily in porter mode. The robot carries a backpack with water and food. Ruth isn't thrilled about the robot on the mission. Too white, too conspicuous. Dan promises to solve this problem. They exit through emergency exit 3 at dawn. Mission, a 10-kilometer radius. Scanning the area, searching for survivors. Route southwest to the nearest town. Dan watches them on the cameras until they're out of sight. Then he loses them. Radio contact, 8-kilometer radius. He sits in the command center and waits. Every 30 minutes, Ruth checks in. The channel is clear. Silence. Minimal movement. Isolated dead bodies. They're bypassing them. 4 hours later, Ruth reports. They've found it. A town. Abandoned. The stores have been looted. The houses are empty. But someone is living in the church basement, or had been living there recently. Traces of a fire, blankets, empty tin cans. Someone was here a day or 2 ago. Gone. Direction unknown. We're heading back. 2 hours later, they enter the airlock. Garrett is carrying a bag on his shoulders. That wasn't part of the plan. What is it? Found it in a pharmacy. The pharmacy was boarded up. Inside, it was untouched. The bag is full. Medicine, aspirin, paracetamol, bandages, hydrogen peroxide. Small stuff, but small stuff that saves lives.
Dan looks at the bag, then at Garrett. Good work. Garrett shrugs, his massive shoulders. There's more there, lots of it. I'll be back tomorrow. Dan nods. You'll come back the day after tomorrow. Tomorrow is a rest day. Day 28, end of the 4th week. 2 figures appear on camera. 6, all men, armed, not with rifles, automatic weapons, body armor, moving in an organized manner, in pairs, covering each other's backs, military training. They aren't heading toward the complex. They're combing the area, looking for something, or someone. Dan watches and feels a chill in his stomach. These aren't survivors. These are hunters. Ruth is beside him, looking over his shoulder, silent. Then she says one word. The harvest. Dan turns around. You know them. Everyone knows them. Former private military contractors. They've assembled an army. They trade in people, use them as bait for the dead, as a labor force, like meat. Dan looks at the screen. 6 of them. It's a reconnaissance team, if they find the entrance. They won't find it. The camouflage is perfect. The beacon is off. The ventilation is shut down and camouflaged. Dan watches as the 6 comb through the forest 400 meters from emergency exit 2. They walk on ground beneath which lie 40 levels. They don't know. They don't sense it. They walk right past. They head east. An hour later, they disappear from the cameras. Dan exhales. Ruth doesn't exhale. She says, they'll be back. That was a reconnaissance mission. They're looking for something specific. Rumors, light, a signal that's no longer there, but they heard it before. They know there's something here. They'll come back with a bigger group. Dan is silent. Then he speaks. Then we need to be ready. Ruth looks at him. Ready how? You have 30 robot maids and 1 hunting rifle. Dan doesn't answer. He thinks. He looks at the complex's diagram on the screen. 40 levels. Thousands of tons of concrete, steel, systems he knows by heart. Every valve, every duct, every door. A weapon isn't the only way to defend yourself. The complex itself is a weapon, if you know how to use it. And he does, because he built it. Day 30, a month. Dan makes a decision that keeps him awake for 2 nights in a row. Ruth brings a group of 7 people found in the basement of an abandoned school 12 kilometers to the south. Among them is a man, large, aggressive, tattoos on his arms, a scar across his cheek. He demands food. He demands a weapon. He demands to be taken to the boss. Ruth brought him because there are 4 women and 2 children in the group, and they didn't want to go without him. He protected them, in his own way. Dan meets the group in the airlock. HOSPES offers water and food. The man takes a mug of water, drinks, throws the mug on the floor. Says he doesn't need water, but answers. Who's in charge here? Where are the weapons? How many people? Dan stands before him, a head shorter, half his size at the shoulders. He answers calmly. I'm in charge. The weapons are none of your business. There are enough people. If you want to stay, there are rules. The man leans toward him. What rules? Dan doesn't back down. First, no violence. Second, everyone works. Third, my decision is final. The man laughs, leans in even closer. And if I don't agree with your rules? Silence in the airlock. 4 women and 2 children behind the man. Ruth stands by the wall, hand on her gun. Dan looks the man in the eye. Then the door is behind you. You leave. 1. The group can stay if they want. The man straightens up. His expression changes. He didn't expect this. He expected fear, or bargaining, or an attempt to curry favor, not an ultimatum. He looks at Dan for 10 seconds. Then he glances back at the group, the women, the children. They're looking at him, silently. One of the women pulls a child close. The man turns back to Dan. Fine, your rules. But I want meat for dinner. HOSPES 7. Lily immediately interjects. Dinner is served at 6 o'clock on the 4th level, sir. Today's menu features braised beef with root vegetables from the hydroponic. Would you like to specify your preference for a side dish? The man looks at the robot, then at Dan, then back at the robot. What? Lily repeats. Braised beef with root vegetables. Fresh bread and salad are also available. The man is silent. His face changes again. The anger fades. Something else takes its place. He swallows. Real beef. Real, sir. Grown at the air level from cell cultures. Identical in taste and texture to the real thing. The man sits down on the airlock floor. He just sits down. His legs won't hold him. Not from weakness, from those words. Real beef. Fresh bread. Salad. He hasn't heard those words in 7 months. Dan looks down at him, then sits down next to him, on the floor, next to the man who a minute ago wanted to intimidate him. They sit side by side, silent. HOSPES stand around them, waiting. Finally, the man speaks softly. My name is Mark. Dan nods. Welcome home, Mark. Day 35, camera number 6, night. Dan isn't sleeping. Insomnia. An old habit that didn't disappear in the apocalypse, but got worse. He sits in the command center and switches between cameras. First, clear. Second, clear. Third, forest. Darkness. Fourth, road. Empty. Fifth, hill. Sixth, he pauses. Movement on camera 6. Lots of movement. He zooms in. Night vision turns the image into green grain. Figures. Dozens. Hundreds. They're coming. Slowly. Silently. A herd. A horde. Dan counts. 20. 50, 100. Counting is pointless. They're moving as a solid mass along I-40, 3 kilometers to the south, from east to west. A dark river of bodies. Dead, ordinary, slow, but they're numbers. Dan sits and watches. This is the first herd of this size he's seen since arriving at the complex. The cameras used to show loners, groups of 5, of 10. This is different. This is hundreds, maybe thousands. They keep coming and coming and coming, a continuous stream. Martha stands behind him. She isn't sleeping. She can't sleep. Mr. Orlovski. According to the thermal imaging cameras, there are approximately 2,300 units in the stream. Direction of movement, west-southwest. Speed, approximately 3 kilometers per hour. Estimated time to pass the observation zone, 4 hours and 20 minutes. Dan nods. They're passing by. Not toward him. By. But 3 kilometers. If someone on the surface makes a loud noise, a gunshot, a scream, the herd will turn. 3 kilometers for 2,000 dead, that's an hour's walk. He thinks of the 6 harvest scouts. If they return, if they start shooting, the herd will hear and turn, not toward the harvest, toward the sound. Toward his hill, toward his ventilation shafts, which he has sealed with grates. The grates will withstand the pressure of 1, of 10, not of 2,000. He sits and calculates the load. A steel grate 4 millimeters thick, mounted with 6 M12 bolts. Maximum load. He calculates in his head. It'll hold. If they don't all press down at once. If they all press down at once, it won't hold. But the dead don't press down with intent. They press down randomly. So it'll hold. Probably. He isn't sure. And that uncertainty keeps him from getting out of his chair for 4 hours. The herd passes. By morning, camera 6 is clear. The highway is empty. Only tracks. Hundreds of ruts in the mud. Dan leans back in his chair, closes his eyes, opens them. Martha, I need data on the herds, routes, frequency, sizes, everything the cameras have recorded since the computer was activated. We'll be done. Data available in 12 minutes. Dan waits. The data appears on the screen. Over 8 months, the cameras recorded 114 passages. Solitary, small groups, medium herds of up to 100, and 3 large herds of over 1,000. All 3 passed along the highway. The direction is the same: westward, in winter, eastward in spring. Migration. The dead migrate, like animals. Dan looks at the data and his engineer's brain kicks in. A pattern. Large herds follow the roads, along the lines of least resistance. The asphalt is smooth, no obstacles. The dead don't think, but their bodies remember the roads. Their feet walk on the asphalt because it's easier that way. That means if we block the highway, redirect the flow, create a detour, we can control the herd's route, not stop them, guide them. Dan takes out a notebook. He draws a map of the area. The complex is here. I-40 is here, 3 kilometers. If we set up roadblocks at key junctions, the herd will take the detour. Not 3 kilometers from the complex, but 10, a safe distance. He draws arrows, points, calculations. His hand flies across the paper. He's in his element. This isn't a fight. It's engineering, the logistics of the dead. Morning, breakfast. Dan shows Ruth the drawings. She looks, for a long time. Then she speaks. It's madness, but it might work. We'll need a lot of material. Trucks, concrete blocks, or cars. The highway is full of abandoned cars. Dan nods. If we block off 2 exits, right here and right here, the herd will take the ring road, right past us, always past us. Ruth does the math. 2 exits means at least 30 cars. Drag them over, set them up, secure them. 3 days of work. Out in the open. Risky. Dan nods. 3 days. Ruth sighs. Okay, when do we start? Tomorrow. Ruth nods. She stands up. She goes to gather the team. Garrett. Mark. He's big and strong. Pushing cars is his job. Tyler. No, Dan stops himself. Tyler is 16. It's dangerous up there. He can't send a kid. Tyler stands in the dining room doorway. He heard everything. I'm going. Dan turns around. No, I'm going. I'm not a kid. Dan looks at him. Thin, cheekbones sticking out, serious eyes. 16 years old. In the world before the apocalypse, he'd be going to school, playing video games. In this world, he's been surviving alone among the dead for 2 months. Dan is silent for 5 seconds. All right, but you're right by my side, always within sight. Tyler nods. Day 36, surface operation, 5 people. Dan, Ruth, Garrett, Mark, Tyler. 2 HOSPES in porter mode. Tools, ropes, crowbars. They head out at dawn. Emergency exit 3. March south toward the highway. 3 kilometers. Dan walks and counts his steps. An old habit from insomnia, counting so as not to think. Ruth is ahead. A shotgun. The only weapon for the 5 of them. Mark found a tire iron in the spare parts and is carrying it on his shoulder. Not a firearm, but better than nothing. The highway. They step onto the asphalt. Dan sees it for the first time, not through a camera. Wrecked cars, dozens of them. Rusty, dusty, doors open, some overturned. Inside? He doesn't look inside. No need. He knows what's there. Ruth leads the group to the first exit, an interchange at the junction of I-40 and a local road. Here, the herd can turn toward the hills. They need to block it. Cars. Dan chooses this one, a sedan, still on its wheels. Garrett and Mark brace their shoulders against it. They push. The car creaks and crawls across the asphalt. It's heavy, slow, meter by meter. Tyler is next to Dan. He helps keep it on track. The HOSPES push with them. Robots are stronger than humans. Each HOSPES can lift up to 100 kilograms. The car comes to a stop across the exit ramp. The first one, the second one next to it, the third. By noon, 5 cars are blocking the exit ramp. Not a wall, a barricade. The slow dead. They won't climb over the cars. They'll go around, on the asphalt, straight ahead, past the exit, past the hills, past the complex. The second exit is 2 kilometers to the east. They're walking along the highway. Dan sees the world, not through a camera, with his own eyes. The road stretches off into the horizon, empty. Forest on both sides, bare. The trees are like skeletons. The sky is gray, low. It smells like rain, and that same Swedish scent, distant. They pass a truck with a delivery logo on the side. The back door is open. It's empty inside, looted long ago. Ruth stops. She raises her fist. Everyone freezes. Movement, ahead, on the road. 3 figures, dead, standing in the middle of the highway. Not moving, just standing there, heads bowed, waiting for something. Sound, movement, warmth. Ruth gestures, a detour, through the ditch, through the woods, 30 meters, back onto the road. They go around them, quietly, slowly. The dead don't react. Tyler walks beside Dan. His breathing is steady. He isn't scared. He's used to it. Dan watches him out of the corner of his eye. 16 years old, used to the dead.
It's wrong, but it's reality. Second exit. Work. Cars. Pushing. Placing. Aligning. Mark works like a machine. Silent. Pushing. Sweat rolls down his neck. The muscles in his arms bulge. He pushes the sedan by himself where it would take 2. Garrett is nearby. Silent too. Working. 2 big, quiet men doing heavy physical labor, and there is something therapeutic about it. Dan notices. Mark is calm. For the first time since they arrived. No aggression, no tension. He's just working. That's what he needs. Not words, not rules. Work. By evening, the second ramp is blocked. 6 cars. A tighter formation than the first. They're returning. Exhausted. 3 kilometers to the complex. Their legs are buzzing. Dan counts his steps. 1,200. 1,300. The emergency exit door. The airlock. Inside. The door closes. White light. Clean floor. Dan leans against the wall and closes his eyes. Martha is waiting in the airlock. Mr. Orlovski. Dinner is ready. HOSPES 7. Lily reports that Mrs. Holloway. Dan opens his eyes. What Mrs. Holloway? While you were away, 2 women appeared at the emergency exit perimeter. 1, unarmed, with her hands tied. Mrs. Caroline decided to let her into the small airlock. The woman is in the medical bay. Multiple bruises, cuts, dehydration. Her name is Jenna Holloway. Dan goes down to the medical bay, level 9. HOSPES 12. Sarah is standing by the door. She lets him in. A woman is lying on the bed. Red hair, dirty, tangled. Her face is bruised. A scar across her eyebrow, fresh. Her wrists are rubbed raw, ropes. She was kept tied up. She's asleep. An IV in her hand. Saline. Painkillers. Dan stands by the bed and looks. Caroline is nearby, speaking quietly. She came to exit 2, alone, hands tied in front. The rope is frayed. She frayed it herself, against a rock, for a long time. Her hands are raw. She stood in front of the door and knocked. The camera showed it. I decided to let her in. Dan looks at Caroline. You made the right decision. Caroline lowers her eyes. She said one thing before losing consciousness. She said that they were coming for her. Dan doesn't move. How many? She didn't say, just that they're coming.
Dan turns around. He goes to the command center. The cameras, all 12 of them. He scans the perimeter. Nothing. Clear. Clear for now. Martha, switch all cameras to high sensitivity mode, maximum range. Will do. He sits in front of the cameras and waits. An hour. 2. At the end of the 3rd hour, camera 9, movement, 6 figures, armed, automatic weapons. The same ones, or others just like them, moving through the woods, fast, purposefully, leading a dog on a leash. The dog is pulling, picking up a scent. They're following it, following Jenna. Dan counts. 6 armed men, a dog, heading toward emergency exit 2, a kilometer to the exit. In 20 minutes, they'll be there. The exit's camouflage is active. They won't see the door, but the dog can smell it. Jenna's scent.
Fresh, leading straight to the door, Dan thinks.
Quickly. He has no weapons. There's 1 hunting rifle and Mark's crowbar against 6 assault rifles. No, not like that. He has no weapons. But he has a plan. He looks at the diagram. Emergency exit 2. Airlock. Exterior door. Above it, the ventilation system. A camera nearby. A speaker. And, he thinks, ground-level ventilation outlets. 4 of them. All covered by grates. But check valves. Air can flow out. What if he sends hot steam through them? No, useless. Steam isn't a weapon. What if sound? Loudspeakers on the outer perimeter. 4 speakers, installed for voice communication. Power. He checks the specs. Maximum power 120 decibels. That's loud. Very loud. Pain threshold. But not a weapon. No match for 6 men with automatic weapons. Dan thinks further. The dog. The dog is leading them. Without the dog, they're blind. Night. Darkness. The forest. Without a trail, they won't find the entrance.
He doesn't need to defeat the 6 of them. He needs to take out the dog. Or the trail. Martha. Is there a substance in the medical supplies with a strong odor capable of masking a human scent? Ammonia on level 9, chemical reagents section. Bleach on level 8, disinfection section. Eucalyptus oil in the aromatherapy unit on level 36. Ammonia. How much? 20 liters of concentrated solution. 10 minutes. Dan. Ruth. Emergency exit 2. The outer door is locked. Camouflage is active. They're pouring ammonia onto the ground around the door, within a 10-meter radius. The smell stings the nose, eyes are watering. They're pouring it over every rock, every crack, every inch of ground Jenna walked on. Then they retreat inside. The door closes. Camouflage activates. Dan runs to the command center. Cameras, 6 on camera, 300 meters. The dog pulls. They're moving fast. 200 meters. The dog slows down. Head down, sniffing. 150 meters. The dog stops. It spins in place. It whines. The man with the leash tugs. The dog won't move. It spins, sniffs. No trail. The ammonia has masked everything. The 6 stop. One leans toward the dog, touches it. The dog whines, rubs its nose with a paw. The ammonia has its mucous membrane. It's not dangerous. But the trail is lost. The 6 stand 150 meters from the emergency exit, 150 meters from the door behind which 20 people are sleeping in warm beds. They stand. They look around. Night. Forest. Silence. One of them raises his hand, a gesture. Spread out. Search. They split up, in pairs. They comb the area, flashlights, beams strike the trees, over the rocks, over the rocky outcrop behind which lies the steel door. The beam slides over the rock, misses. The camouflage holds. The artificial rock is indistinguishable from the real thing. Dan holds his breath. The beam passes by. The 2 move on. They comb the area. They search. They don't find him. 30 minutes. 40. An hour. They're tired. The dog is useless. It's lying on the ground whimpering.
The one in charge gives an order, a hand gesture, withdrawal. 6 of them gather. They leave, westward. Dan watches them disappear into the darkness. The last flashlight goes out behind the trees. He slumps back in his chair. His hands are shaking, sweat on his forehead. Ruth stands nearby, silent. Then she speaks. It was the harvest. Dan nods. They were looking for her, Jenna. Ruth nods. They'll be back. Yes. With a larger group. Yes. Dan sits and thinks. Ammonia doesn't last forever. Tomorrow, the scent will fade. The day after tomorrow, a dog will pick up the trail. He needs a solution. Not a temporary one, a permanent one. He looks at the complex's layout, at the map of the surrounding area. At I-40, the highway, a herd of 2,000 head passed along 3 days ago. And a plan begins to take shape in his head. Not a defense plan, an engineer's plan. Ruth.
I need a map of all the roads within a 20-kilometer radius. All the interchanges, all the bridges, all the tunnels, everything. Ruth looks at him. Why? Because the best defense isn't a wall. The best defense is when the enemy can't reach you. And between me and the enemy, 2,000 dead are walking down the highway. And I'm going to direct them. Ruth is silent for 5 seconds. Then she speaks. You want to use the herds as a defense. Dan doesn't answer. He's already sketching in his notebook. Arrows, dots, roads, interchanges, barriers, herd routes, the mathematics of the dead. He calculates speed, density, migration frequency, and slowly, on the paper, what he will later call the perimeter begins to take shape. Not a wall, not a fence. A network of blocked roads and open corridors through which the herds will circle around his hill. A living shield of the dead. Not a single harvest squad will mate through the herd. They won't be able to approach unnoticed. They won't be able to approach quietly. Every shot will draw thousands of the dead. Every step will cost them men. And he'll be sitting inside, under 40 meters of concrete, drinking coffee, and waiting for them to leave or die. He draws until dawn. Marta brings him coffee 3 times. At dawn, he puts the finishing touches on it. He looks at the drawing, a diagram, a blueprint, a design. Just like 5 years ago. Only back then he was designing a house, and now he's designing a fortress around the house, using the dead as bricks. He sets down his pencil, rubs his eyes. Martha stands nearby. Mr. Orlovski, you haven't slept in 22 hours. I recommend some rest. Dan stands up, stretches. His bones crack. How many people do I need to carry out this plan? He shows the blueprint to Martha. She scans it with her eyes. 7 seconds. To move approximately 120 vehicles to the specified positions, a crew of 10 people will be required over a period of 14 days. Assuming there's no serious resistance from the dead objects. 10 people. He has 19. But 10 of them are kids, and 1 is still in the med bay. 9 adults. Minus those who have to stay inside. Caroline, May, Jorge, minus Jenna, who's wounded. 5. Him, Ruth, Garrett, Mark, Tyler, and 2 HOSPES. Not 10. 7 with the robots. Dan looks at the blueprint. Not 14 days. 20. Maybe 25, if the harvest doesn't return sooner. He folds the blueprint, puts it in his pocket, goes to the 2nd level, lies down on the bed, closes his eyes. Asleep in 5 seconds. He dreams of a highway, empty. Day 38. Jenna Holloway opens her eyes. 3 days in the medical ward. Eye verses, painkillers, a dream. Martha is there, around the clock. Jenna looks at the robot, and the first thing she says is, "Who the hell are you?" Martha tilts her head. "Good afternoon, Miss Holloway. My name is Martha. I am model HOSPES 3. How are you feeling?" Jenna sits up in bed. She winces in pain. Her ribs, 2 are broken. Martha noted this during the initial examination. Jenna touches the bandage on her ribs, then the bandages on her wrists.
clean, white. They smell of antiseptic. She raises her hands and stares at the bandages for a long time. Where am I? In Shelter A47, ma'am. You're safe. Jenna lowers her hands. She looks at the white walls, at the soft light, at the clean floor, at the robot with amber eyes. Her face shows no expression, empty, blank. Then she speaks. I need to use the restroom. Martha helps her stand up, leads her to the bathroom. Jenna closes the door. Silence behind the door. 20 minutes. Martha stands and waits. Doesn't knock, doesn't ask. Waits. Jenna comes out. Her eyes are red. Her face is wet. She lies back down, turns her back to the wall. Dan arrives on the 4th day, knocks on the doorframe. Jenna is lying on her side, with her back to him. Doesn't... He enters, sits down on a chair next to the bed. Silent. 30 seconds. A minute. Jenna speaks without turning around. If you came to ask what they did to me, you can leave, Dan replies. I came to ask if you know how to cook. Silence. Jenna slowly turns around. She looks at him. Green eyes. Inflamed. Angry. What? Cook? Food? Can you? She sits up. She winces. Her ribs. She looks at him as if he's crazy. Are you serious? Dan nods. I have a kitchen. A professional one. Level 23. Copper cookware. Japanese knives. A convection oven. A pantry. Truffle oil. I need a chef. Jenna looks at him. For a long time. He sees something change in her eyes. The anger doesn't go away, but something else is added to it. She's a former chef. A Michelin-starred restaurant in Atlanta. That was her life, her purpose. 2 months ago, a gang kidnapped her and forced her to cook with cockroaches and rat meat. For 2 months, she stood over the fire and made edible what shouldn't be edible. And she thought she'd never touch a normal kitchen again, that it was broken, forever.
Dan doesn't know that. He sees only a woman with red hair and a scar across her eyebrow who looks at him and says nothing. She speaks. Truffle oil. Yes. Real. She closes her eyes, opens them. Show me. 2 days later, Martha allows Jenna to get up. Her ribs are immobilized. The painkillers are working. Dan leads her to the 23rd floor. The elevator. The doors open. A hallway. A door with a sign on the panel. The kitchen. Dan opens. Jenna enters. She stops at the threshold. Kitchen. 60 square meters. Stainless steel. Work surfaces. 6 burners. 2 convection ovens. Grill. Deep fryer. Industrial-grade range hood. Copper pots on hooks. Dan included them in the design because he read that copper distributes heat best. Japanese knives in a wooden block. A full set. Chef's knife. Santoku. Nakiri. Deba. Yanagiba. Jenna walks over to the stand. She reaches out. Her fingers hover a centimeter from the handle. She doesn't touch it. Then she walks around the kitchen. Slowly. She touches the countertop. Runs her hand over the stove. Opens the oven. Closes it. Walks over to the pantry. The door. Behind it, shelves, jars, containers, spices, oils, flour, sugar, yeast, rice, pasta. And in the corner, on a separate shelf, truffle oil. A dark glass bottle. Jenna picks it up, unscrews the cap, sniffs it, closes her eyes, stands like that for 10 seconds, turns to Dan. If you say this is a joke right now, I'll kill you. Dan replies, I ordered duck, 70 servings, dinner at 7. Jenna looks at him. 70. There are 20 of us. That's plenty. Jenna puts the bottle back. She closes the pantry door. She turns to him. Get out. What? Get out of my kitchen. Dan leaves. The door closes behind him. He stands in the hallway and hears a sound through the door. Quiet at first, then louder. Jenna is crying. For a long time. Loudly. Unashamedly. He stands there listening and doesn't leave. An hour later, the sound stops. 2 hours later, a scent begins to waft from under the door. Oil, garlic, herbs, meat.
Dan stands in the hallway and inhales, and smiles. Dinner. 4th level, dining hall. 20 people at the tables. HOSPES are serving. Lily the robot is carrying out plates. On the plates, Dan looks. Duck confit. The meat is dark, shiny. The crust is perfect. A side dish beside it. Root vegetables from the hydroponic greenhouse, roasted, with rosemary. Sauce at the bottom of the plate, dark, thick, made from duck juices and red wine from the cellar. Jenna doesn't come out of the kitchen. Dan doesn't insist. The plates speak for her. Garrett takes the first bite, puts it in his mouth, chews. He pauses, closes his eyes, chews slowly, opens his eyes, looks at the plate, then at Dan, says nothing, just eats, silently. May cries over her plate, quietly. Tears drip into the sauce. She eats and cries at the same time. Mark sits in the corner. He eats. His huge hands hold the fork like a surgical instrument, neatly, carefully, as if afraid of crushing the food. Noah is at Caroline's table, eating with his hands. Caroline doesn't correct him. She eats herself, slowly, with her eyes closed. Tyler eats quickly, as always, but he stops halfway through, puts down his fork, looks at his plate, then finishes slowly. Ruth eats methodically. The taste experience, as she performs it, looks like a military operation. Take a bite, chew, savor, next bite. But at the end, she leans back in her chair and says one word quietly. Dan can barely hear it. My God. 20 people are eating real food prepared by a real chef for the first time in 8 months. Silence at the tables, only the sound of forks and knives, and occasionally a quiet sob. Dan sits at the head of the table and looks at his people, and he thinks. There. That's how it works. Not with weapons, not with threats. Duck confit is the weapon. Coffee with a heart, hot soup, a clean bed, a hot shower. That's what people remember. That's what people are willing to stay for, willing to work for, willing to defend. In 6 hours in the kitchen, Jenna has built more loyalty than he could have built in 6 months of speeches and orders. After dinner, Dan goes down to the 23rd level. He knocks on the kitchen door. Silence. He opens it. Jenna is sitting on the floor, back against the wall, knees pulled up to her chest. The area around her is clean. The kitchen is spotless. Every pot is in its place. Every surface is wiped down. She's cleaned everything up. Dan sits down on the floor next to her. He's silent. Jenna is silent. 5 minutes. Then she speaks without looking at him. I cooked with rats for 2 months. Dan doesn't answer. They caught rats and brought them to me, and I cooked them. Because if the food wasn't tasty, they beat me. She falls silent. Dan sits and listens to the silence. Jenna continues. I thought that was it, that I'd never be normal again, that my hands only remembered rat meat and the grease from cockroaches, and the smell of burning feathers when they dragged in crows. Silence. Dan speaks. The duck was perfect. Jenna turns her head, looks at him. Her eyes are wet, red. But there's something new in them. Not anger, not emptiness. Fire. A small one, but fire. There will be bread tomorrow. Dan nods. Good. Real bread. With yeast. With a crust. Dan nods again. Good. Jenna turns away. And for the salad, I need fresh lemons. There are lemons. On the 5th level, the greenhouse. Jenna closes her eyes. Lemons. Real lemons. Real ones. D-Day 45. Perimeter construction. Every day the group goes to the surface. Dan, Ruth, Garrett, Mark, Tyler. 2 HOSPES. The work is monotonous, hard. Find a car, release the parking brake, push, park, next one, and the next. In 10 days, they've blocked 4 of the 6 key intersections around the complex. The herd will go through the corridor, right past, always past. Mark works the hardest, silently, furiously. He's found himself in physical labor. Every day he comes back drenched in sweat, eats Jenna's dinner, goes to bed. In the morning, he gets up, works again. Not a single conflict in 10 days. Garrett is right beside him. 2 big, quiet men. They don't talk. They work. Between them develops what Dan privately calls a silent friendship. Tyler learns fast. By the 3rd day, he's already deciding for himself which cars can be moved and which are stuck. On the 5th day, he proposes a system of levers made from metal beams found on the side of the road to flip over heavy trucks. Dan looks at his sketch, drawn on a scrap of paper. Rough, but correct. The fulcrums are right. The load calculation is approximate but within acceptable limits. Dan looks at Tyler. He nods. Go ahead. Tyler does it, and it works. On the evening of the 45th day, Dan is sitting in the command center. The cameras are clear. The harvesters haven't returned in 2 weeks. Maybe they've lost interest. Maybe they're preparing. He doesn't know. On the screen is Simon's inventory data, a complete list of everything in the complex. 4,000 pages. Simon worked 3 weeks straight, days off. Every level, every warehouse, every shelf, every box. The result is impressive. The complex is overstocked, a 5-fold supply for most items. But there are gaps. Surgical instruments. The set is incomplete. Broad-spectrum antibiotics. A 3-year supply for the current population. Sounds like a lot, but if the population grows to 100 months. Seeds, many varieties, but no wheat, no potatoes, no tomatoes. The greenhouse operates on hydroponics and aeroponics. It grows greens, vegetables, lemons, soybeans, but no grains. Flour in the warehouse, final supply. When it runs out, nothing to bake bread with. Dan looks at the list and makes notes in his notebook. Seeds. We need an expedition, a long one. There's a preserved agricultural seed bank in Virginia. He knows about it from his old job. He designed a storage system for a related company. 200 kilometers, a week round trip, through territory infested with the dead, through the Reaper's influence zone. He writes it down in his notebook. Seed expedition, high priority, after the perimeter is completed. Day 52. The perimeter is complete. 6 interchanges are blocked. 132 vehicles have been moved and positioned. 21 days of work. Dan stands atop the hill, next to a camouflaged elevator shaft, and looks down. From here, he can see the highway, or rather, a line of rusty vehicles blocking the exit. The work is rough, unsightly, but functional. The herd will pass by on the highway. There's nowhere to turn off. All the exits are closed. The dead will go straight, down the corridor, around his hill, a living shield of dead bodies. Dan looks at it and feels what an engineer feels when a project works. Quiet satisfaction. Ruth stands nearby.
She's looking too. She speaks.
All that's left is to check.
Dan nods.
We're waiting for the next herd. They have to wait 9 days. Day 61, camera 6, night. A herd, smaller than the first. Martha counts, 700, coming from the east, along the highway. Dan sits in the command center and watches. Ruth is nearby. Tyler, Caroline. No one is sleeping. Everyone wants to see. The herd approaches the first junction. The front rows run into a barricade of cars. They stop. They press forward. Those behind are pushing. The pressure builds. Dan counts. The cars hold. They're holding. The dead can't climb over. There's a lack of coordination. The front ones are pushing. The ones in the back are pushing the front ones. A traffic jam. Slowly, very slowly, the mass begins to shift along the barricade, westward, down the highway, past the exit, past the hill, past the complex. Dan watches and counts the time. The herd passes the barricade in 40 minutes. Not a single car has moved. Not a single dead has turned toward the hills. 700 heads are heading west along the highway. The perimeter is working. Dan leans back in his chair. Ruth nods. It's working. Tyler smiles. Caroline looks at the screen and speaks softly. You built a fence out of the dead. Dan shakes his head. Not a fence. A corridor. They choose where to go themselves. I just remove the options. Day 65, second month. Population 38. 19 more people have arrived over the last 3 weeks. In small groups, 2 at a time, 3 at a time, solo. Rumors are spreading, quietly, in whispers. There's a place where the lights are on. There's a place where they serve hot soup. Dan doesn't let everyone in. He assesses every newcomer, not by profession, by their eyes, by the way they enter the airlock, by what they say first, by how they react to HOSPES. He didn't let one person in. A man, 30 years old, came alone. He was polite. He smiled. He asked for water.
Dan gave him water through the small airlock.
The man drank and looked around. Not at the walls, at the cameras. He was looking for cameras. Dan asked through the speaker where he was from. The man named a city. Dan asked how he got there. The man explained. In detail. Too much detail. Too smoothly. A rehearsed story. Ruth stood next to Dan in the command center. She listened. Then she said one word. Reconnaissance. Dan nods, turns on the speaker. Sorry, we're full. You can take the water. The man's expression changes on camera. For a second. Just a second. Then he smiles again. Of course. Thanks for the water. He leaves. Dan watches him on the cameras. The man walks west, calmly. Then he picks up speed. Then he runs. He runs 3 kilometers to the highway. There, by the car. 2 people in the car, waiting. The man gets in the car. The car drives off, south, the harvest. Dan watches the screen as the car disappears around the bend. Ruth is right. They haven't retreated.
They sent a scout undercover. Now they know there's someone here. They don't know exactly what. They don't know the scale. But they know there are people here. And that they're getting water here. That's enough to make them come back. Dan isn't panicking. He's an engineer. Engineers don't panic. Engineers calculate. The harvest will return. With force. The question is when and how many. The perimeter protects against the herds, not against people with cars. People will drive around the barricades, along the shoulders, through the fields. Barricades on the highway will stop the dead, not the living. Dan needs another kind of protection. He sits in the command center and thinks. 3 hours. A notepad. A pencil. Blueprints. Then he goes to Tyler, the guy on the 12th level. He's assembling something from sewing machine parts. What is it? Tyler looks up. An automatic fishing reel. What for? For traps. Dan looks at the device. Small, simple, elegant. Tyler continues. I've seen how the Reapers move, in pairs. A scout and a shooter. The scout goes first. If you pull the line at shin level, the scout falls. The shooter behind him loses sight for 2 seconds. Dan looks at Tyler, 16 years old. This boy survived for 2 months alone among the dead, and among people worse than the dead. And he's thinking about traps. Not because he was asked to, because he saw the harvest on the cameras and started thinking. Dan sits down next to him. Show me everything you've come up with. Tyler shows him.
6 devices: fishing line, sound traps based on piezoelectric elements from the electrical supply warehouse. Small, self-contained. They emit a sound at a frequency that attracts the dead. You place them along the enemy's route. You turn them on. The dead in the area swarm to the sound. The enemy walks right into a crowd of the dead out of nowhere. No weapons, no fighting, just sound. Dan looks at the devices, then at Tyler, then back at the devices. His hands are shaking. Not from fear, from realization. This boy is a genius. Not in an abstract sense, in a concrete engineering sense. He sees a problem and builds a solution from whatever is at hand. Like Dan. Like Dan 5 years ago. Dan says, "I need 50 of these sound traps." "You can do it." Tyler does the math. There are enough piezo elements for 40. If we take apart the old speakers on level 8, then 60. Dan nods. Take them apart. And one more thing. I need drones. Tyler looks at him. What kind of drones? Small ones, with speakers, radio-controlled, to fly above the ground and make noise, lure the dead, guide the herd where we need them to go. Tyler is silent for 10 seconds. Then he says, "We have motors, we have controllers, we have batteries. We don't have propellers. Print it." Level 15, the 3D printing workshop. Tyler blinks. There's a 3D printer here? 2 industrial ones. Dan hadn't mentioned this level before. He'd packed so much into the project that he'd forgotten half of it himself. Tyler jumps up, runs to the elevator. Dan watches him and shakes his head. 16 years. Day 70, week 10, population 42. 4 new arrivals in the last week. Among them, a woman, short, thin, Asian features, short black hair, a worn leather suitcase in her hands. She came alone, from the south. She made her way through the barricades on the highway, on foot, along the shoulder, past the dead, alone. Dan meets her in the airlock. She stands there in silence, staring at the walls, at the light, at HOSPES. She doesn't cry. She doesn't look surprised. She just stands there, too tired for even surprise to register. Dan asks over the speaker, "Who are you?" She answers, "Ha-un Che, dentist." Dan freezes. He looks at Ruth beside him. Ruth raises an eyebrow. Dan turns on the speaker. "Please open the suitcase." The woman opens it. Inside are dental instruments, mirrors, probes, forceps, drills. Everything is worn, used 1,000 times, but clean. Each instrument is wrapped in cloth, each in its place. She carried this suitcase through a dead world. 200 kilometers, maybe more. She didn't abandon it. Dan opens the inner door. Dr. Cho is eating in the dining hall, alone, separate from the others. Hospice places a plate in front of her. Soup, bread. Cho looks at the food. She picks up a spoon. Her hand trembles. She brings it to her mouth. She stops, puts the spoon back down, stands up, takes the plate, leaves, eats in her room, alone, behind a closed door. Hospice -12. Sarah reports to Dan. Mrs. Cho prefers to eat alone. Dan nods. Don't push it. Give her time. The next day, he takes her to the 29th level. Dental office. Door. He opens it. Dr. Cho enters. Chair. A real dental chair with automatic adjustments. Drill. Ultrasonic scaler. Set of instruments. New ones, in their factory packaging. Anesthetics. A full cabinet. Lidocaine. Articaine. Mepivacaine. She reads the labels, one after another. Slowly. Then she sits down in the chair, the patient's chair. She reclines, looks at the ceiling, and starts to laugh. Quietly, then louder.
The laughter is strange, ragged. Dan stands in the doorway and watches. It's not laughter. It's sobbing that starts out like laughter. She's laughing and crying at the same time. 15 minutes. Dan doesn't come in, doesn't comfort her, stands in the doorway, waits. After 15 minutes, she quiets down, sits in the chair, stares at the ceiling, speaks in a 6 months. I treated people without painkillers, pulled teeth, lanced abscesses. They screamed, every one of them, every face. I remember. Silence. Dan speaks. Now you have painkillers. She turns her head, looks at him. Her eyes are dry, red, empty. Then they slowly fill with something. Not joy, not gratitude. Determination. I need an assistant. Do you have anyone with medical training? No. Then I need someone with strong nerves and steady hands.
I'll train them myself. Dan nods. Day 75. Population 51. The complex is changing. Jenna is in the kitchen every day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. She doesn't cook out of necessity. She cooks out of rage. Every dish is proof that she isn't broken, that her hands remember more than just rats, that she's a chef, a real one. The bread coming out of the oven smells so good that people on the second floor wake up from the scent. Dr. Cho sees her first patient, Garrett, cavity on the lower 6th tooth. He sits down in the chair, a huge man. His arms hang at his sides. He's nervous. Cho puts on gloves. She takes a syringe with anesthetic. She injects it. Garrett freezes. He waits for the pain. No pain. He opens his eyes, looks at the doctor. She's working, silently, precisely. The drill buzzes. A filling. 20 minutes. Done. Garrett gets up from the chair, touches his cheek. It's numb. That's normal. He turns to Cho. Thank you. Cho takes off her gloves, nods. Her face is expressionless. But when Garrett leaves, she sits down on a stool and folds her hands in her lap. And sits like that for 5 minutes. Doesn't move. The first patient in 6 months she's treated without screaming. May teaches classes every day. The library on the 32nd floor. 11 children, a blackboard, chalk, textbooks. She teaches them to read, to write, to count. History, geography. Little Lily sits in the front row. She draws. Everything May writes on the board, Lily copies into her notebook. Letters, numbers, maps. She draws beautifully, neatly. May notices. She shows Caroline. Caroline looks at her daughter's drawings and says nothing. Then she goes to Dan. She finds him on the 6th level. He's repairing a valve in the water purification system. Tyler is nearby, handing him tools. Caroline stands in the doorway. Dan turns around. She says, Lily's drawing. Dan wipes his hands with a rag. That's good. Caroline shakes her head. You don't understand. She hasn't drawn since that day. Since the day when. She doesn't finish. Dan understands. Since the day her father was mauled to death, right in front of her. Caroline says. She draws. Then, more quietly, thank you. She turns around. She leaves. Dan watches her go. Tyler is nearby. He watches too. Then he returns to the valve. Dan returns. Day 90, 3 months. Population 63. Dan stands in front of the screen in the command center and looks at the map. Virginia, the agricultural seed bank, 200 kilometers to the northeast. He knows this place. He designed the storage system for it 6 years ago. A mothballed silo off the main roads. If it hasn't been found and looted, thousands of varieties lie there. Wheat, rye, potatoes, tomatoes, corn, sunflowers. Everything needed for full-scale agriculture. Without these seeds, the complex relies on hydroponics and flower reserves in storage.
2 years' worth of supplies at the current population.
If the population grows to 100.
8 months. An expedition is necessary. Dan plans for 3 days. Route, equipment, people. The group. 4 people. Ruth is in charge. Garrett, Mark, and Edward. The new guy. A former trucker. Knows the roads. Knows how to drive anything on wheels. They found a working pickup on the outskirts of the nearest town. Ruth and Jorge spent 2 days fixing it up. The battery is from the complex's supplies. Fuel from cans found in a garage on the highway. Dan stays inside. He wants to go. He wants it with every fiber of his being. It's his project, his seeds, his map. But he can't. He's the operator. If something happens to him, 63 people will remain in the complex that only he knows, down to the last bolt. Tyler knows a lot, but not everything. Not all 40 levels. Not every valve. Dan stays. He watches the cameras as the pickup drives onto the highway and disappears over the horizon. Radio contact. 8-kilometer radius.
In 8 kilometers, they'll be out of range. And Dan will wait. Blind, deaf. 6 days. 6 days of hell. Dan doesn't sleep. Insomnia hasn't just returned. It has become his permanent state. He sits in the command center and stares at the cameras showing empty hills. Caroline comes every evening, brings coffee, sits down next to him, says nothing. On the 3rd evening, she speaks. "You need to sleep," Dan replies. "I know." "Why aren't you sleeping?" "Because they're out there, and I'm here." Caroline is silent. Then she says, "You can't be everywhere." Dan doesn't answer. Caroline puts her hand on his shoulder for a second. She takes it away. She stands up. She leaves. Dan sits and stares at the blank screen. His shoulder remembers her hand for another 20 minutes. On the 4th day, Jenna bursts into the command center. Dan jumps up. "What?" Jenna stands in the doorway, an apron, hands covered in flour. Her face is red. "I need rosemary." "What?" "Rosemary, we're out in the greenhouse." "The last bush died. I need fresh. For dinner." Dan looks at her. On the 4th day of waiting for the expedition, when 4 of his men are 200 kilometers away and may already be dead, a woman with a scar across her eyebrow comes to him and demands rosemary. For dinner. He opens his mouth, closes it. Then he speaks. "Ask HOSPES to check the stock of dried herbs on level 8. It should be there." Jenna snorts. "Dried? What do I need dried for? I need fresh, alive, with a scent." Dan looks at her for 3 seconds. "I have 4 men 200 kilometers from here, and I don't know. And you came here for rosemary." Jenna straightens up, crosses her arms over her chest. "That's exactly why. Because when they get back, I want a proper dinner waiting for them. With proper rosemary, not some dried up crap." Dan is silent. Jenna is silent. He turns away toward the screen. On level 5 of the greenhouse, that level, there should be seedlings. Ask Jorge. He knows where. Jenna nods. She leaves. Dan looks at the closed door. And for the first time in 4 days, he almost smiles. Day 6. Dawn. Camera 9. Movement. Dan jumps out of his chair. A pickup truck. Dirty. A dent on the left fender. But it's moving. On the highway. Toward the complex. Dan zooms in. Ruth is behind the wheel. Garrett is next to her. In the back. 3 people. Not 4. 3. Mark, Edward, and someone else. A woman. A stranger. Dan counts. 4 left. 4 returned, plus 1 new person. Everyone is alive. He sinks back into his chair, closes his eyes, exhales. Martha is beside him,
confirming identification of 4 expedition team members and 1 unknown individual. Recommend preparing the airlock for reception. Prepare. Airlock. The door opens. Ruth enters first, dirty, tired, but unharmed. Garrett follows her. He's limping. His right leg is bandaged. Mark is carrying 3 large bags on his shoulders. The bags are full, heavy. Edward is dragging 2 boxes. And a woman, tall, thin,
Long chestnut hair pulled back in a ponytail, tanned face, scratches, dirt. But her eyes are alive, alert. Hunter's eyes. She enters the airlock, and the first thing she does? She scans the room. Exits, cameras, corners, professionally, like an animal entering a den. Ruth speaks. This is Emma Wright, a former National Park Ranger. She saved us. Dan looks at Emma. Emma looks at Dan. She doesn't say a word. The story of the expedition. Ruth recounts it in the command center. Caroline, Tyler, Dan. They listen. The first 2 days were uneventful. The roads were empty, few dead, just a few stragglers. They drove around them. On the 3rd day, they found a seed bank, intact, untouched, a lock on the door. Ruth broke it open. Inside, Ruth falls silent. Thousands of bags, hundreds of varieties, everything preserved, everything alive. They loaded as much as they could carry, 3 sacks, 2 boxes, wheat, rye, potatoes, tomatoes, corn, sunflowers, apple cuttings, pear cuttings. Dan listens, his hands clenched on the armrests of his chair. Seeds. The future. On the way back. Day 4. An ambush. Not the harvest. Looters. 5 of them. Blocked the road. Wanted the car and the cargo. Ruth negotiated, to no avail. Garrett took a ricocheting shrapnel wound to the leg, a minor injury. But the situation was hopeless. They were stuck on the road. 5 armed men on one side. They had no weapons except for 1 rifle on the other. And then Emma came out of the woods, alone, with a bow, a homemade one. 3 arrows in 4 seconds. 3 marauders on the ground, not dead, wounded, arrows in their legs. The remaining 2 dropped their weapons and ran. Emma stood at the edge of the road and watched them, silently. Then she turned to Ruth. She said, "You'd better go. Their friends are nearby." Ruth said, "Get in the car." Emma said, "I don't need a car," Ruth said. "Get in the car," she repeated. Emma got in. Dan looks at Emma. She's standing against the wall of the command center, silent, hands folded across her chest, a bow on her back. Homemade, rough, but it works. Dan says, "Thank you." Emma shakes us home. "Don't worry about it," Dan says. "We have spare rooms, a hot shower, food, if you want to stay." Emma looks at him. "I'm not staying. I came in because she insisted." She points at Ruth. "I'll stay the night and leave." Dan nods. "As you wish. Your room is on the 2nd level, number 17. Emma nods. She leaves. Tyler shows her the way to the elevator. She follows him without looking back. Night. Dan is in the command center. The seeds have been sorted, packaged, stored in the room on the 6th level. The hydroponic racks have been reconfigured. Tomorrow is the first wheat planting. Dan sits in front of the screen and thinks about Emma. She'll leave, in the morning. He knows it. She's the type who doesn't stay, who's used to being alone, who thinks attachment is a weakness. He understands this because he used to be like that. Before the complex. Before people. Before Caroline with her coffee and Tyler with his blueprints and Jenna with her duck. He can't keep her. He shouldn't try. But he types the command on the panel. HOSPES-18. Una, the quiet librarian model. Room 17. Standard hospitality protocol. With one addition. Hot cocoa. With a small marshmallow. Will be done, Mr. Orlovski.
What shape of marshmallow do you prefer? Dan thinks for a second. A bear. Will be done. Morning. Emma on camera. Heading toward the elevator. Backpack, bow. She leaves. Dan doesn't stop her. The elevator goes up. Emergency exit door 3 opens. Emma steps out. She stands on the surface, looks at the forest, at the sky, takes a step, stops, stands for 30 seconds, a minute, turns around, looks at the door. The door is open. Waits. Emma stands and looks at the open door. Then she goes back, enters. The door closes. Dan sees on camera as she walks back into room 17. She sits down on the bed. She picks up the mug of cocoa that Yuna left on the table. It's cold now. It doesn't matter. She drinks. She sets the mug down. At the bottom is a small bear-shaped marshmallow. She looks at it for a long time. Then she lies down on the bed and covers herself with a blanket. Dan turns off the camera. He smiles. Day 120, 4th month, population 80. Dan is sitting in the dining hall at breakfast, doing the math in his head. 80 people. Water consumption is 24,000 liters per day. The closed-loop system is handling it. Electricity consumption for lighting, heating, and equipment. The reactor is operating at 40% capacity. The reserve is huge. Food. Hydroponics provides greens and vegetables for 100 people. Wheat was planted 3 weeks ago. First harvest in 2 months. Until then, flour from the warehouse. There's enough. Meat.
Cell cultures at the aeroponic level. Beef. Chicken. The taste is identical. The texture is 90% natural. Jenna swears like a sailor. She's right, but 90 is better than 0. Medications. The pharmaceutical lab on the 18th is operating in basic mode. Antibiotics, painkillers, antipyretics. It synthesizes basic drugs from raw materials in the warehouse. But raw materials, of course. Dan estimates, at the current rate of consumption for 2 years. We need a chemist, or a pharmacist, someone who can run a full synthesis cycle. Another item on the list. People we need. Emma stayed, not because Dan asked her to, not because anyone persuaded her. She just didn't leave. The day after returning from the surface, she went to Ruth and said, "Show me your perimeter." Ruth showed her. Emma walked the entire route in a day. Every barricade, every exit, every camera blind spot. She came back. She went to Dan. She said, "You have 4 blind spots in the northwest.
The cameras don't cover them. Anyone could get in unnoticed." Dan looked at the map. She was right. 4 spots. A forest. Thick. The cameras couldn't reach them. He asked, "What do you suggest?" She replied, "Me. I'll be your eyes on the outside." Since that day, Emma has been going out every day. She leaves at dawn, returns at dusk, patrols, checks the traps, counts the dead, tracks the movement of the herds, reports to Dan every evening, briefly, precisely, without unnecessary words. The northwest is clear. A lone figure at the 3rd barricade. Went around it, headed south. Human tracks on the eastern trail. 2 people, headed north, not toward us. Dan listens and marks it on the map. Every evening after the report, a mug of hot cocoa with a small, bear-shaped marshmallow awaits her in Emma's room. Every evening she drinks it. She's never once asked who orders it. Day 125. Dan goes down to level 1, server room. He's wanted to come in here for a long time.
He put it off. He was afraid. No, he wasn't afraid. He put it off. The server room is the brain of the complex. All the data is stored here. Logs, archives, the system's history since activation, and what happened before activation, before him. He sits down at the terminal, enters a command, archive, operator logs. The screen flickers. Data is loading. And Dan reads something that makes his fingers go numb. Operator 1, activation. 4 years and 7 months ago. Name, Marcus J. Webb. Age at the time of activation,
43 years old. Status: suspended. Reason: unstable mental state. Actions: attempt to shut down life support systems on levels 1 through 10, prevented by automatic security. Operator isolated on level 2. Status after isolation: suicide. Dan reads the word suicide and his stomach clenches. Operator 2, activation, 3 years and 2 months ago. Name: data deleted. Age: data deleted. Status: shut down by the system. Reason: failure to meet operator suitability criteria. Details: access restricted. 2 operators before him. One went mad and killed himself. The second was shut down by the system itself. Shut down? What does that mean? Killed, expelled, shut down like a program. Dan sits in front of the screen and his hands are cold. He types a query: operator suitability criteria. The screen responds: access restricted. Test operator access level. Tester, not operator, tester. The word on the screen on the first day. Operator selected. No, not selected. Undergoing testing. Probationary period. The system observes, evaluates. And if he doesn't make the cut, what then? Like the second operator. Shut down. Dan stands up from the terminal. His hands are shaking. He leaves the server room. He walks down the hallway. Stops. Leans against the wall. Breathes. Martha? Yes, Mr. Orlovski? You knew about the previous operators. I am aware of the basic data on the previous operators, Mr. Orlovski. Why didn't you say so?
You didn't ask, Mr. Orlovski. Also, this information has restricted access.
Dan looks at her. Amber eyes, a soft face, a warm voice, a robot, a program. Or he remembers HOSPES 1, that very one, nameless, with dark eyes, the one he doesn't remember from the specs. Martha. What happened to the second operator, specifically? The data has been deleted, Mr. Orlovski. I don't have access to the details. Dan looks at her for a long time, then turns away, goes to the second level, to his room, lies down on the book, stares at the ceiling. The system watches him, evaluates him, every day, every decision, who he let in, who he didn't let in, how he manages, how he speaks to people, how he resolves conflicts. It watches and decides whether he's suitable or not, and if not, shut down. He lies there and thinks. Then he sits up. Then he stands up. He walks to the terminal in his room. Every module has a terminal. He types a query. System: I know about the previous operators. I know I'm on probation.
I'm not going to pretend I don't know. If you have criteria, tell me. I'm an engineer. I work better when I know the specs.
The screen is silent. 10 seconds. 20. 1 minute. Then a single line. Criterion 1, resilience. Criterion 2, empathy. Criterion 3, will not be revealed until the first 2 are met. Dan reads, resilience, empathy. 2 words, simple, obvious. And yet, he understands. The first operator passed resilience but failed empathy, or vice versa. He went mad, couldn't handle it. The second, data deleted. But he failed something, and the system shut him down. Dan sits in front of the screen. Resilience and empathy. He's an engineer with chronic insomnia who cries at the sound of the ventilation and makes coffee for strangers. Is he resilient? Is he empathetic? He doesn't know. But he knows one thing. He won't go mad, and he won't abandon his people. 80 people. His home. He types on the screen. Accepted. The screen goes dark.
Day 150, 5th month, population 93.
Dan declares Christmas. Not December 25th. No one knows the exact date. The calendars are off. The clocks in the complex run on the system's internal time, but the link to the real calendar was lost in the first month of the apocalypse. Dan picks a day, at random. He tells Caroline, "Christmas is in 3 days." Caroline looks at him. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely." She is silent. Then she nods. "What's needed?" "Everything." Dan goes to Jenna, kitchen, level 23. Jenna stands over the cutting board. The knife flies. In 3 days, dinner for 93 people, a festive one, a full house. Jenna stops the knife, looks at him. 93? Yes, in 3 days. Yes. She puts down the knife, wipes her hands, closes her eyes, opens them. "I need helpers, 4. HOSPES and 2 people. Pick whoever you want." Jenna nods. "And a turkey." Dan nods. HOSPES are preparing a turkey cell culture at the aeroponic level.
12 hours until the protein base is ready. Jenna will do the rest.
Dan walks over to Tyler, level 15, the 3D printing workshop. Tyler sits in front of the printer, watching as the print head produces a propeller for a drone, the 10th one. Dan speaks. "I need to take you away from the drones. For 3 days. Tyler looks up. "What's going on?" "Christmas." Tyler blinks. "What?" "I need you to print something." "Not propellers." He hands Tyler a list. Tyler reads it. 93 boxes. Personalized. With lids. Each one engraved with a name. Tyler looks at the list. 93. In 3 days. That's... He does the math. Each box takes 20 minutes to print. 2 printers. 40 boxes a day. 120 in 3 days. That's enough. But the engraving, he thinks. HOSPES 18 Una, the quiet librarian model. Calligraphy is in her programming. She can engrave with a hand tool. Dan nods. Get to work. 3 days of preparation. The complex is buzzing. Jenna is in the kitchen.
4 HOSPES are helping. 2 people from among those who volunteered. Mark. He can't cook, but he can lift heavy things and peel vegetables. His huge hands carefully peel carrots, and it's a sight that makes you want to laugh and cry at the same time. The second volunteer helper, a girl. No, a young woman, 16 years old. Her name is Paige. She arrived a month ago, quiet, unobtrusive, but in the kitchen, she blossoms. Her hands are precise, quick. Jenna notices, nods, hands her a knife. Paige cuts, evenly, beautifully. Jenna watches, says nothing, but she doesn't take the knife away. That's the highest praise. Tyler prints boxes day and night, sleeps 2 hours at a time. Una engraves names in calligraphic handwriting, each name on the lid. Dan gave her a list, 93 names, every single one, no mistakes. Una works slowly, carefully, letter by letter. Inside each box will be a gift. Dan compiled the gift list 2 weeks earlier, secretly, with the help of HOSPES. All 30 robots had been recording for the past 2 weeks what people mentioned in conversation, what they wanted, what they missed, what they remembered. Little things, details. HOSPES listened and recorded and passed it on to Dan. Caroline, her phone, broken, dead. She carries it with her, can't throw it away. It has photos of her husband and children, the only ones. Dan gave the assignment to HOSPES 1, the nameless one, with dark eyes, to recover the data from the damaged device. HOSPES 1 connected the phone to the terminal. She worked for 6 hours. She extracted 123 photos. She printed them on a 12th level printer, on real photo paper, from the stock. She pasted them into an album, leather cover, embossed, name. Dan holds the album in his hands and flips through it. A man, a woman, a girl, a baby, a family, before.
He closes the album, puts it in a box labeled Caroline. Emma, she mentioned it once, in passing, that her old knife, the one she used to carry in the Rangers, broke in the second month. The blade snapped. She carries a new one, but not that one. Dan assigned HOSPES-12 to Sarah, sewing workshop. A leather sheath for the knife, handmade, an engraving on the sheath. Emma Wright. Simple letters. Sarah worked on it for 2 days. The result? Beautiful. Dark leather, even stitches. The engraving is neat. Dan puts the sheath in a box. Dr. Choi. She told Martha, not Dan, Martha, that her tools were old, dull, that she dreamed of a Hugh Freedy set. It's a brand, the best in dentistry. Dan checked the warehouses. On the 29th level, in a sealed container, he found a set, brand new, in its original packaging. He had included it in the project himself, 5 years ago. He didn't remember. He puts it in the box. Tyler. Dan thought about it for a long time. Then he drew a sketch. The HOSP mini project. The model Tyler had been developing for the past 2 months. A small robot for working with children.
2 names on the drawing. Daniel Orlovski, Tyler Morgan. Co-developers. Dan puts the drawing in the box. Jenna. She mentioned it once. In the evening. Tired. As for the apocalypse, she had an apron. Red. With a knife and an inscription embroidered on it. Sarah. The stern butler model. A red apron made of fabric from the 12th level warehouse. Embroidery. A knife. Inscription. The same one. HOSPES reconstructed it from the description. Not perfect, but close. Dan puts the apron in a box. And so on. 93 times. For everyone. Each box is personal. Every gift is a response to what a person said out loud without thinking that anyone was listening. HOSPES listened. Dan listened. Evening. Dining hall. 4th level. Dan enters last. The hall. He stops in the doorway. HOSPES have decorated it. Fabric garlands. Beeswax candles. Where did the wax come from? The 6th level. The experimental apiary he included in the project and forgot about. The candles are burning. Warm light. The tables are set. White tablecloths. Plates. Wine glasses. A personalized box at every seat. People enter. 93 people. They take their seats. Quiet. They look at the tables. At the candles. At the boxes. Jenna comes out of the kitchen, a work apron, dirty, her face red from the heat of the oven, her hands covered in flour. Behind her, 4 HOSPES carry trays, a turkey, golden, glistening, bread, real bread, yeast risen, with a crust. Jenna baked it this morning. Wine from the cellar, hot chocolate with marshmallows for the children, salad with lemons from the greenhouse, roasted root vegetables with rosemary. That very rosemary, fresh, which she grew from the 5th level greenhouse and grew to the right size in 2 months. Jenna places the turkey on the central table, turns around, goes into the kitchen, doesn't stay, eats alone, as always. But the food speaks for her. People eat, quietly, in silence, the sound of knives and forks, sometimes a quiet sigh. Sometimes a quiet sob. Mark in the corner. He eats slowly. His huge hands hold the fork as if it were crystal. May is crying. She doesn't hide it. Garrett eats and his eyes shine. Ruth eats methodically. But after the first bite of turkey, she freezes. For a second. Just 1 second. Then she continues. The children drink hot chocolate and giggle. Little Lily drinks from a mug, and a mustache of chocolate foam remains on her upper lip. Noah taps his spoon on the table, a normal 4-year-old. After dinner, Dan stands up. He raises a glass. Wine, red from the cellar. He speaks. Open the boxes.
93 pairs of hands reach for the boxes. The lids come off. Silence. Complete. Absolute. 10 seconds. 20. 30. No one can speak. Caroline looks at the album. She flips through the pages, slowly. Photographs. Her husband, her children, Lily, Noah, little ones. Before it all. She presses the album to her chest. She isn't crying. Not anymore. She just holds it. Emma holds the case. She turns it in her hands. She reads her name. She runs her finger over the letters. She says nothing. She puts it on her lap. Dr. Cho opens the instrument set. She takes one, a mirror. She turns it in her fingers. It catches the light. He puts it back. He takes the next one, a probe. He puts it back. Her face is expressionless, but her hands are trembling. Tyler looks at the blueprint. 2 names, his name next to Dan's, co-developer. He looks up. He looks at Dan across the room. His lips are moving. Dan can't hear the words. He doesn't need to. He's reading his lips. Thank you. A moment of silence. Then Caroline stands up, slowly. She raises her glass. Her voice is steady, quiet, but everyone in the room can hear her. To our host. Silence. Then chairs scrape back. One by one, everyone stands. 93 people, with glasses, with mugs, with cups of hot chocolate. They stand and look at Dan. Dan stands at the head of the table, a glass in his hand, and at that moment his knees go weak, because he looks at these people, at their faces, at their eyes, and he understands. These are his people, not the residents of the complex, not the bunker's population. His people. Each of them came here from the darkness, from the cold, from fear, from pain. Each had lost someone. Each thought it was all over, and each now stands in a warm hall with candles and a glass and a gift box that says one thing. I heard you. I saw you. You're not here by accident. Dan raises his glass. He drinks. Everyone drinks. He sits down. Everyone sits down. The noise returns. Voices, laughter, crying, all together, all at once. 7. Lily brings refills of hot chocolate to the children and announces as she goes, Mrs. May, would you like another napkin? Your current napkin has absorbed a critical amount of moisture. May laughs through her tears. Lily calmly hands her a napkin. That's my job, ma'am. Later. Night. The hall is empty. Everyone has left. HOSPES are cleaning up. Dan sits alone at a table, an empty glass in front of him, a small box nearby. His box. He hasn't opened it. There wasn't time. He opens it. Inside is a note. Caroline's handwriting. Neat. Accountants. 3 words. You are our home. Dan holds the note. He reads the 3 words. Again and again. Then he folds it, puts it in his breast pocket, stands up, takes the glass, washes it himself, doesn't call HOSPES, puts it on the shelf, leaves the hall, goes to the command center, sits down in a chair, cameras, 12 windows into a dead world. Outside it is night, cold, darkness. Somewhere far away a herd wanders along the highway, his corridor, his perimeter. Dan sits in the chair and for the first time in 5 months feels that he is in his place. Not because the system chose him, not because he passed or failed the test, because 93 people stood up for him, with glasses, with mugs, with notes in little boxes, and that is stronger than any system. Day 180, the 6th month, population 102. Dan stands in the command center and stares at the screen. A red dot, an incoming signal, a frequency he doesn't use, not his radio, not his protocol. Someone is transmitting, directed, At the complex. Marta. The source of the signal. The bearing points southeast. Distance approximately 120 kilometers. Transmission type satellite relay. Dan freezes. Satellite. In a world where the power grid has been down for 8 months, someone has access to a satellite. It's not looters, not refugees, not the Harvest. The Harvest uses army radios and manpower. A satellite is a different level. Government. Or former government. Decrypt a signal. Martha works for 12 minutes. Dan sits and waits. Then the screen displays text. Shelter A47, Survival Corporation, Seoul Operations Group, requesting contact. The ambassador will arrive within 72 hours. Coordinates confirmed.
Please refrain from hostile actions. Lee So-yeon, Director of Logistics.
Dan reads. Rereads. Survival Corporation, Seoul, Korean. They know his designation, A47. They know the coordinates. They know the frequency. They know he's here. How? From where? He sits in front of the screen and thinks. Ruth enters. She reads over his shoulder. She's silent for 30 seconds. Then she speaks. They know too much. Dan nods. Ruth continues. Satellite. That means they have resources, serious ones. Dan nods again. What are you going to do? Wait 72 hours. She'll come, and I want to see her face when she walks into my house. 72 hours. Dan prepares. Not for battle, for a reception. He's an engineer, not a soldier. His weapon is infrastructure. He orders HOSPES to prepare the guest module on the second level, the best one, number 1. Clean linens, fresh flowers from the greenhouse, roses. He included a rose greenhouse on the project. The auditors laughed. It's not funny now.
Now roses are diplomacy. Ruth is stepping up patrols. Emma is on the surface from dawn to dusk. Tyler is deploying drones, 5 of them, small ones, with cameras, 3-kilometer radius. Now Dan can see farther. Garrett and Mark are on duty at the emergency exits, not with weapons, with radios. Dan wants to know about any movement. Day 183, morning. Camera 9, a car, black, an SUV, clean. In a world where all cars are covered in dirt and rust, this SUV is washed, driving down the highway, bypassing the barricades on the shoulder, calmly, confidently. The driver knows the route, knows about the barricades, knows where to go around them. Dan watches. The car stops a kilometer from the hill. The door opens. A woman gets out, alone. Dan zooms in. Asian appearance, around 35 years old, black hair tied in a bun. And Dan blinks. A white blouse, perfectly ironed, black pants, low-heeled shoes. In the apocalypse. In the middle of a dead world, a pressed blouse. She walks toward the hill. Alone. Unarmed. Unescorted. With a confident stride, as if she's going to a business meeting. Ruth stands next to Dan. She watches. She speaks. She is either insane or absolutely confident. Dan responds. Or both. He turns on the external speakers. Miss Yi, emergency exit 2, 200 meters northwest of your position. The woman on camera stops. She looks up. She searches for the speaker. She doesn't find it. She smiles. She turns northwest. She walks. Airlock. The door opens. Yi So-yeon enters. She stands. She looks. At the white walls. At the light. At Martha, who is waiting by the inner door. So-yeon doesn't flinch at the sight of the robot. She isn't surprised. She nods to Martha as if they're acquaintances. This means she knows about HOSPES. She knows about the complex. She knows more than she should. Dan comes down to the airlock himself. He stands before her. She is 5 centimeters taller than him. She looks down at him, calmly, appraisingly. She speaks. Daniel Orlovski, designer, operator A47. Nice to finally meet you. Dan replies. You know my name. So-yeon smiles. I know considerably more than just your name, but that's enough for now. Dan looks at her, then at Martha.
Martha, coffee for the guest. To the conference room. Will be done, Mr. Orlovski. Soyeon raises an eyebrow. Conference room? You have a conference room? Dan shrugs his shoulders. I have a dining hall that seats 200. It'll do. The dining hall, 4th level. Soyeon sits down. She looks around. Tables, chairs, light, cleanliness. Her eyes take in every detail. Dan sees how she's looking. Not like a guest, like an inspector, like a logistics expert. She's assessing the capacity, the scale, the resources. Martha sets out the coffee. 2 cups, white. Soyeon takes a cup. She drinks. She pauses for a second. She sets it down. Good coffee, thank you. Dan drinks his. He's silent. He waits. Soyeon begins. The Survival Corporation. The remnants of the South Korean government's evacuation project, established 6 months before Day Zero. Who in the government knew? Not everything, but enough. They managed to get 3 ships out, 300 people on the first, 200 on the second, 400 on the third. 900 survivors, plus the crews, plus military escorts, about 1,200. They settled on an island off the coast of South Korea, an autonomous bay. Resources, infrastructure, not like here, more modest, but functional. Soyeon was the logistics director. She was in charge of loading the ships. 300, 200, 400, 900, and 7,000 remained on shore, which she didn't have time to load. She doesn't talk about it, but Dan can tell, by the way she holds her cup, by the way her fingers turn white on the handle. 7,000 names, every morning. Soyeon continues, they know about the shelters, not all of them, about the system. Project Ark wasn't a one-off. 12 complexes were planned, all over the world. 12 operators. Someone designed them, someone built them, someone activated them. The corporation intercepted fragments of information, satellite data, beacon frequencies. They found 3 active signals, a 47 in North Carolina, K-12 in South Korea, and 1 more, somewhere in Europe, maybe Germany, maybe Switzerland. The signal is unstable. Dan listens. 3 out of 12. The other 9 are either inactive, destroyed, or their operators failed the test. He doesn't say the last part out loud. Soyeon looks at him. Mr. Orlovski, I'm not here as an invader. We have a base. We have people. We have resources. But we don't have what you have. Your complex isn't just a bunker. It's a production base, a pharmaceutical lab, a sperm bank, a technology center. We want to cooperate, exchange resources, exchange knowledge, exchange people. Dan is silent. He drinks his coffee. Soyeon waits, patiently. Dan sets down his cup. What exactly are you proposing? Soyeon takes a folded sheet of paper from the inside pocket of her blouse. She unfolds it. She places it in front of him. A list. Dan reads it. The corporation offers 3 containers of firearms and ammunition, 2 solar panel generators, a set of surgical instruments for a field hospital, a virologist, ready to arrive on a permanent basis. In exchange, access to the pharmaceutical lab, seed samples from the bank, technical documentation for the HOSPES system. Dan reads the last item 3 times. Technical documentation for HOSPES. They want his robots. That's what this is about. Not seeds, not medicine, robots. He looks up at Soyeon. She looks calm, waiting. Dan sets the list aside. He stands up, walks over to the wall, stands with his back to Soyeon. He thinks. He needs weapons, desperately. Solar panels for ground operations, needed. Surgical instruments. Dr. Choi will be happy. A virologist, critically needed. The second wave of mutations. The runners. The listeners. Rumors of a third. About the conductor. He needs someone who understands the virus. But the documentation on HOSPES. This isn't technology. These are his people. 30 robots who take care of the daily lives of 102 people, who sing lullabies to the children, who remember that Mark likes his soup hot, who bring hot cocoa with bear-shaped marshmallows to room 17 every evening. To hand over their blueprints is to hand over a part of home. He agrees. I'll give you the seeds. I'll give you the medicine. I'll take the people. I won't give you the HOSPES documentation. So-yeon's expression doesn't change. Why? Because this isn't technology. It's family. So-yeon is silent for 5 seconds. Then she speaks. I can understand that, but my superiors won't. Dan sits back down. Then convince them. Or offer something else in place of the documentation. So-yeon looks at him, appraisingly. You don't seem like the kind of person who runs a fortress,
Dan replies. This isn't a fortress. It's a home. So-yeon smiles, slightly, with the corner of her lips.
Maybe that's why the system chose you. Dan freezes. She knows about the system, about the choice, about the probationary period. She knows more than she's saying. So-yeon stands up. I need to contact base. Do you have a communication node? Dan is silent for 3 seconds. Then he nods. Level 11. Marta shows her the way. So-yeon nods. She walks toward the door. She stops. She turns around. She speaks. Mr. Orlovski, I lost 7,000 people on the shore because I didn't have enough ships. Every morning I wake up with a list of names. I don't have ships. But you have what I don't. You know how to build houses. I know how to fill ships. Together, we can do more than apart. Think about it. She leaves. Dan sits and thinks. Day 210, 7th month. Population 120. So-yeon left 3 weeks ago. We made a deal. Seeds, medicine, antibiotics from the pharmaceutical lab. In exchange, 20 rifles, ammunition, solar panels, a surgical kit, and a man. Dr. Park Jin-ho, a virologist, short, skinny, wears glasses, 52 years old. He took over the lab on the 18th level and didn't come out for 3 days. Martha brought him food. On the 4th day, he came out. He found Dan. He said, I need samples, fresh ones, tissue from the infected, second-generation mutants, runners or listeners. Dan looked at him. You realize that to get those, we'll have to catch a dead one. Park nodded. Dan called Emma. Tyler built a cage, welded it together from car frames. Inside, a sound lure, a piezoelectric element, a quiet click every 3 seconds. For a listener with heightened hearing, it's a beacon. Set it up 3 kilometers to the south. We waited 5 days. On the 5th day, Emma reported. We've got one, a listener, completely blind, standing inside the cage. His head turns, left, right, scanning the sound field.
Dan watched through the drone's camera, and his fingers went cold. This isn't a regular dead one. This is different. Adapted. Sample collection. Tyler distracted the listener with a speaker on one side of the cage. Pak took samples from the other. A syringe through the bars. A scalpel. 3 samples in 5 minutes. The subject twitched. A hand reached through the bars, passing a centimeter from Pak's face. Ruth stood with her rifle. It wasn't needed. They're gone. Pak didn't leave the lab for 2 days. On the 3rd day, he found Dan. His face was gray. His eyes were red. He spoke. The virus is mutating purposefully. The runners are faster because the virus has restructured their muscle fibers. The listeners are blind because resources have been redirected from sight to hearing. This is no accident. It's adaptation. The virus is learning. Dan listens. A chill runs down his spine. Pak continues. The 3rd generation will be coordinated. A herd under the control by a single brain. A conductor. Not rumors, reality, which is approaching.
Dan speaks. A cure. Pack shakes his head. A vaccine. For the living. The foundation is there. Protein markers. I can isolate the antigens. We need equipment and time. How much? A year. Maybe more. Dan nods. Level 18 is at your disposal. If anything is missing, make a list. Evening. Dining hall. Dan looks at the people and sees something he didn't expect. Jenna is eating with someone for the first time. With Paige, her student, at a small table in the corner, eating in silence, but with another person. Dr. Choi next to Simon. He's become her assistant. Not a doctor, but with strong nerves, just as she asked. Dan didn't assign Simon, didn't ask Paige to help in the kitchen, didn't order Jenna to eat in the dining hall. It just happened. Because a home isn't a structure. A home is people who have found their place. Day 240, the 8th month. Dan goes to the surface for negotiations.
Emma spotted a camp 30 kilometers to the southeast.
20 people. They call themselves the New Order, former cops and firefighters. They control a stretch of the highway. They charge a toll. They're neutral. Dan wants to turn them into a buffer between the complex and the Reapers. Ruth is against it. You're the operator. You can't leave, Dan replies. Hospice don't know how to negotiate. I need to see their faces. 4 of us. Dan, Ruth, Emma, Mark. A pickup truck. An hour's drive. The camp. A former gas station. Commander Coleman. A former firefighter. Shaved head. A scar on his chin. Dan goes out alone. Hands in plain sight. Unarmed. Speaks briefly. He has a complex. Resources. He offers medicine and food in exchange for information and early warning about the harvest. Coleman listens. Then he speaks. The Reapers were here 2 weeks ago. They asked about the light in the hills. They're looking for you. Dan nods. Coleman speaks. What else can you offer besides medicine? A dentist.
Once every 2 weeks. My doctor will come and treat your people's teeth. Coleman smirks. Teeth. Dan doesn't smile. When was the last time your people had toothaches and no one to help them? Coleman stops smirking. He holds out his hand. Deal. Day 255. The harvest. Coleman gave 3 days' warning. A convoy from the south. Trucks. 3 APCs. 500 men. Dan gathered his inner circle. Ruth spoke first. 500. We have 20 rifles and 120 people, 70 of whom are civilians and children. Dan nods. We won't fight. He shows the plan. Perimeter, drones, sound traps, 3 false structures on the surface that look like bunker entrances, decoys, and, most importantly, complete sealing. Ventilation is blocked. Warm air doesn't escape. The harvest's thermal imagers won't find anything. A closed loop for 36 hours. The column arrives, led by Colonel Prescott, a stony face, a military bearing. A man who believes that the apocalypse is an opportunity to build a world without the weak. Reconnaissance finds 3 decoys. Empty. Prescott isn't stupid. He realizes they were expecting him. He orders a search for ventilation. Warm air. Thermal imagers. But the ventilation is sealed. The ground is cold. The complex is invisible. 17 hours of searching. Nothing. 24 hours. Nothing. The air inside grows heavy. Caroline approaches quietly. Dan nods. I know. 10 more hours. 30 hours. Prescott sets up camp for the night. Dan launches the drones. 10 of them, with speakers. He guides them east, toward the herd of 1,200 head he's been tracking for 3 days. The drones turn on the sound. The herd turns. It follows the sound, 3 kilometers per hour. Dan leads them like a shepherd. 4 hours. The herd enters the passage Dan left in the perimeter on purpose. 1,200 dead emerge from behind the hill, straight toward the harvest camp. A sentry screams. Gunshots. Every shot attracts more of the dead. Chaos.
Prescott gives the order to retreat. The APCs start up. The trucks drive off. They abandon their tents, weapons, gear. 500 people run south. 1,200 dead follow them, slowly but relentlessly. Dan opens the ventilation. 34 hours and 12 minutes. 2 hours to go. Fresh air rushes into the complex. People breathe deeply. The siege is over, without a single shot fired from the complex. The morning after the siege, snow. Dan stands on the surface next to a camouflaged elevator, tracks all around, tire ruts, an abandoned truck, tents, weapons. On the horizon, a dark streak of a departing herd. Emma is nearby, Caroline. 3 people on top of the hill. Caroline speaks quietly. There are still many of them there, alive. Dan nods. Emma, what are we going to do? Dan pulls out a radio, Tyler's prototype, 200-kilometer range. He turns it on. He speaks into the air.
This is Shelter A47. If you can hear this, we're here. We have light and heat and hot soup. If you can make it to the coordinates I'm about to give you, and if you're willing to work, we've got a spot for you. He transmits the coordinates. Lets go of the button. Silence. Snow. Wind. He puts the radio away. We head down. It's cold. Breakfast. Pancakes. Real ones. With honey from the experimental apiary on Besh. 120 people are eating after a night when 1,200 dead and 500 armed men passed by them. And they're eating pancakes. HOSPES 7. Lily is serving tea. Mark smiles. For the first time. Jenna stands in the kitchen doorway in a red apron. Her face is serene. Day 265. Dan gathers his inner circle. Shows a map. 4 points within a 200-mile radius. Abandoned civil defense bunkers. Satellite nodes. Mini complexes for 20 people each. With seeds. With medical supplies. With 1 HOSPES. Ruth counts. 4 groups of 5. 20 people out. That's a lot. Dan nods. But if we don't go out, we'll die as an idea. A bunker for our own kind is a dead end. The network is life. Tyler raises his hand. I want to lead one of the groups. Dan looks at him. Skinny, but not scrawny. He's grown up. His hands are strong. His eyes are confident. Dan nods. West node. You lead. Emma, south. Ruth, east. Caroline, north. 4 groups leave at weekly intervals. Dan sees Tyler off at the emergency exit. He doesn't know what to say. For the first time. He holds out his notebook, with the perimeter blueprints, with the calculations. Tyler takes it, presses it to his chest, puts it in his backpack, walks away, doesn't look back. A month later, walkie-talkie. Tyler, the western node is activated. In a week, Emma, south. Ruth, east. Last is Caroline, north. 4 lights in the darkness. Dan stands in the command center and looks at the map. 5 points. A 47 in the center. 4 nodes around it. He types on the panel. System. Network active. The screen flashes. Criterion 3. Creation. Under the second line. Probationary period complete. Welcome, operator. Dan reads, resilience, empathy, creation. 3 words. Simple ones. He passed. Martha is nearby, silent. Dan speaks. Martha, that first day, who activated you? Pause. For the first time, Martha doesn't answer instantly. Then, the system, Mr. Orlovski. Thank you, Martha. It is my function, Mr. Orlovski, said with a warmth that makes you want to cry. Year 1, day 365. 5 points on the map. A 47 in the center, 4 nodes. Population 210 people. A year ago, Dan woke up on the cold floor with a broken back of his head. Now he's standing on the surface. Not for work, for himself. The sky is blue. Winter is retreating. Green grass between the patches of thaw. The wind on his face. The smell of wet earth. He stands and breathes. No plan, no list.
just standing. Caroline approaches, stands next to him, speaks. Lily drew you yesterday, in the command center, with a mug. Noah asked if he could live here forever. I said yes. He said okay and went off to play. She turns to him. Her eyes are different, not the same as 10 months ago. Warm. She speaks. I couldn't be able to trust you for a long time, not because of you, because of what happened before. Dan nods. I know, she says. I trust you. She takes his hand. For a second, squeezes it. Let's go. Walks away. His hand remembers her fingers. That evening, Dan brings the mug of cocoa himself, not through the panel. He knocks on the door of room 17. Emma opens it. She looks at the mug, then at him, takes it, drinks, says, the 12th time, I counted. I asked Yuna. She said it's standard procedure for the reconnaissance unit. She's silent. Then she opens the door wider. Come in. Dan comes in, sits down on a chair. Emma sits on the floor, with her back to the bed. They sit in silence for 20 minutes. Dan stands up, stops at the door.
This isn't standard procedure. Emma watches.
I know. Command center. Tyler is nearby. He's returned from the Western hub. He pulls an old folder out of his backpack. Found it in the Western bunker. Dan opens it. Blueprints. Not his, but the same format, the same notation system, the same client. On the 3rd page is his signature, his handwriting. But these are K-12 blueprints, Korea. Next to his signature is a second one, another engineer, the date. 6 years ago. Someone was designing the K-12 before Dan designed the A47. The same 40,000 in cash, the same non-disclosure agreement, 12 engineers, 12 Arks. Someone knew in advance and paid, not for armies, for homes, with libraries, with saunas, with robots that remember what kind of soup you like. Dan closes the folder. Who is this someone? He'll find out, because engineers don't give up on a task. Martha enters. Incoming signal, frequency 142.7 megahertz. Source, South Korea, K12. Decryption, Shelter A47 from Shelter K12. Operator Kim Dong-hyun. Population 312. Status, stable. Glad to hear we're not alone. Dan reads, rereads. Another operator, another shelter, on the other side of the world. Types a reply. Shelter K12 to A47. Operator Daniel Orlovski. Population 210. 5 nodes. We have coffee. You have tea. I think we can work this out. Sends. Night. Bed. Insomnia. But a different kind. Warm. He lies there and thinks. A year ago, he didn't know why they gave it to him. Now he knows. Not for survival. For building. A home. A network. A world. A note in his pocket. You are our home. 3 words in an accountant's handwriting. He carries it every day. The hum of the ventilation, a quiet, steady sound. A year ago, he cried at that sound. Now he falls asleep to it, calmly. Because 130 people are sleeping in warm beds. Because lights are burning at 4 points. Because 8,000 kilometers away, another engineer is reading his message and smiling. Because Martha is standing at the door of a little boy's door, holding his hand and singing a lullaby, softly, all night long. That is my role.